The armored convoy rolled through Karif Valley at 1400 hours, 12 soldiers riding toward what intelligence called a routine patrol. Nobody noticed the quiet woman in the back corner checking coordinates on a tablet they'd never seen before. Nobody asked why her radio had channels theirs couldn't access. And when Sergeant Mason Cole told her to stay down and stay quiet, nobody saw the flicker in her eyes, the look of someone who'd orchestrated 100 battles without firing a single shot. 3 minutes later, the first rocket hit. The lead vehicle exploded into a fireball. Ambush positions erupted from every ridge. And in that moment of absolute chaos, when trained soldiers dove for cover and commanders screamed into dead radios, the quiet woman they'd ignored simply clipped on her headset and said 4 words that changed everything. Ghost Lead is active. If you're hooked, stick with me to the very end of this story. Drop a like and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The desert didn't forgive mistakes. Elena Vance had learned that truth across 17 countries, 32 operations, and more close calls than she'd ever admit to the therapist the agency made her see twice a year. She'd learned it in the mountains of Afghanistan, the jungles of Colombia, the frozen hellscape of Chechnya. But here, in the furnace of Karif Valley, the lesson felt especially sharp. The heat hit like a physical wall the moment she'd stepped off the transport helicopter that morning. 114 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of heat that turned metal into branding irons and made every breath feel like inhaling smoke. The kind that killed the careless and punished the unprepared. Elena was neither. She sat in the back of the 3rd MRAP, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, her body swaying slightly with each rut and pothole in the desert trail masquerading as a road. The seat was hard. The air conditioning was broken, and the smell inside was a mixture of gun oil, sweat, and the particular mustiness of military equipment that had seen too many deployments. Around her, the rest of the team barely registered her presence. Sergeant Mason Cole occupied the front passenger seat, his M4 carbine held loosely between his knees, eyes scanning the horizon with the practiced vigilance of someone who'd done this too many times. He was late 30s, maybe early 40s. Weathered face, scar tissue on his knuckles, the kind of NCO who'd seen enough combat to know when to push and when to pull back. He'd glanced at Elena exactly once when she boarded. "Support specialist?" he'd asked. "Something like that," she'd replied. He'd grunted, turned away. That was the entire conversation. In the seat across from Elena sat Corporal Danny Reeves, 19 years old and fresh out of infantry school, still wearing his idealism like poorly fitted armor. He kept checking his rifle, adjusting his helmet, fidgeting with his radio. All the tells of someone who hadn't yet learned that nervous energy burned calories you'd need later. Behind them, Staff Sergeant Maria Torres methodically cleaned her weapon, her movements economical and precise. She hadn't spoken to anyone since they left the FOB, Forward Operating Base. Elena recognized the type. Professional, competent, and smart enough to save conversation for moments that mattered. The convoy consisted of 4 vehicles total, 2 MRAPs, 1 cargo truck, 1 technical support vehicle, 18 personnel. Standard patrol configuration for this sector of operations. On paper, they were conducting a routine supply run to Firebase Sentinel, a small outpost 20 clicks northwest. In reality, Elena knew better. Nothing in Karif Valley was routine. This region had seen 3 ambushes in the last 2 months. Intelligence indicated increased enemy activity. Local informants had gone quiet. All the warning signs were there. But apparently, command had decided the supply run couldn't wait. Elena's tablet sat in her lap, screen dark. To anyone glancing over, it looked like a standard-issue tactical computer. They wouldn't notice the custom modifications, the encrypted satellite uplink, the direct line to assets they didn't know existed. She kept one earbud in, barely visible, tucked beneath her tactical cap. The agency's encrypted frequency hummed with occasional check-ins from her handler, a man she'd never met in person, but whose voice had guided her through more crisis points than she could count. "Ghost Lead, this is Overwatch. Radio check." Elena touched her collar mic so subtly that Torres, watching her weapon, never noticed. "Copy Overwatch, Lima Charlie." Loud and clear. You're approaching checkpoint Delta in approximately 6 minutes. ISR shows no thermal signatures in the immediate area, but we've got a pattern of life change that's bothering our analysts. ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, drones, satellites, signals, intercepts. The invisible eyes that most soldiers never knew were watching. Elena's pulse didn't change. Her breathing stayed steady, but her attention sharpened. Specify, she murmured. Local vehicle traffic dropped to 0 about 90 minutes ago. 3 shepherds who usually move through the valley turned back at the northern pass, and were picking up intermittent radio emissions that match known insurgent equipment, but they're using burst transmissions. Professional stuff. Elena's eyes shifted to the ridgeline on the east side of the valley. Rocky. Full of shadows and crevices. Perfect ambush terrain. Time to danger area? She asked quietly. 4 minutes at current speed. She glanced at Cole. He was still watching the horizon, but his posture was relaxed, confident. He thought he had this under control. Any chance of rerouting? Elena asked Overwatch. Negative. Command already rejected that option. Supply timeline is critical, apparently. A pause. Politics. Of course it was. Elena had spent enough time in the machinery of warfare to understand how it worked. Some colonel back at headquarters had promised someone else that the supplies would arrive by 1600 hours. That colonel had probably promised because some general had promised a congressman or a journalist or someone else who mattered in the chain of influence that wound its way back to Washington, D.C. And now 18 soldiers were driving through a kill zone because of those promises. The convoy slowed slightly as they navigated a section where flash flooding had carved deep channels across the road. The MRAP's suspension groaned. Dust billowed through the open gunner's hatch above them. Private First Class Jackson manned the .50 caliber machine gun up there, his legs visible from below. Elena could hear him humming something, classic rock, maybe Lynyrd Skynyrd, completely oblivious to the calculations running through her head. She studied the terrain with the eye of someone who'd spent years learning to read battlefields. The valley was approximately 800 meters wide at this point, narrowing ahead to maybe 400. Hills rose steeply on both sides, topped with scattered boulders and scrub brush that provided concealment but little cover. An abandoned watchtower stood on the western ridge, its walls pockmarked with old bullet holes. 3 dried-up irrigation ditches cut across the valley floor at irregular intervals. The road itself was barely more than packed earth and gravel. If she wanted to ambush a convoy here, she'd position the main element on the eastern ridge with overlapping fields of fire. Secondary element on the western high ground to cut off retreat. IED, improvised explosive device, or RPG. Hit on the lead vehicle to stop movement, then pour fire into the kill zone. Textbook tactics. And whoever was out there had probably read the same textbook. 2 minutes to checkpoint Delta, Overwatch said in her ear. Elena shifted her weight slightly. Her hand moved to the modified radio pack beside her, one the team had been told was standard support equipment. She activated it with a touch that looked accidental. Instantly, she had access to frequency bands that weren't on any of the team's radios. She could hear the background chatter of the agency's Combat Operations Center, the distant acknowledgement from 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons circling at 20,000 feet, 50 clicks southeast. The steady breathing of the drone operator who had a Reaper UAV unmanned aerial vehicle holding pattern outside the valley. All of it invisible to the convoy, all of it waiting for her word. Cole's radio crackled. "Lead vehicle, this is command. Status report." The driver in the first MRAP responded. "Command, we're approaching checkpoint Delta. No contact. Roads are clear." "Copy that. Maintain speed and interval. Firebase Sentinel is expecting you at 1600. "Roger, command." "Out." Elena watched Cole relax slightly at that. His grip on the M4 loosened just a fraction. She almost said something, almost broke cover to warn him. But Ghost Lead wasn't supposed to exist. Her presence here was so classified that even the officer who'd signed off on her attachment to this convoy didn't know what she actually did. The cover story was simple. Technical support specialist, testing new communications equipment. She was testing equipment, all right, just not the kind they thought. 1 minute, Overwatch said. Elena took a slow breath, scanned the ridgeline one more time. That's when she saw it. A glint. Brief, Maybe 200 meters up on the eastern slope, half hidden behind a boulder formation. Glass or metal? Something that caught the sun for just a fraction of a second before disappearing. Overwatch, she whispered. I've got possible spotter, eastern ridge, bearing 085, approximately 200 meters elevation. Checking now. A pause. Negative thermal signature at that location, which meant either nothing was there or whoever it was knew how to defeat thermal imaging. Thermal blankets, proper concealment, discipline. The professional option. Recommend high alert, Elena murmured. Copy. Bringing assets to readiness condition 1. The wind died. In the desert, that was never a good sign. Wind was constant here. Hot, abrasive, relentless. When it stopped, even the land seemed to hold its breath. Elena's hand moved to her sidearm. Not drawing it. Just ready. 10 seconds passed. 15. The convoy rolled forward, engines rumbling, tracks crunching over gravel. 20 seconds. Cole started to turn toward Torres, probably about to say something about the heat. And then the world exploded. The RPG, rocket-propelled grenade, hit the lead MRAP's right front quarter panel with a sound like a thunderclap compressed into a millisecond. The shaped charge detonated on impact, punching through the vehicle's armor and turning the interior into a blast furnace. The MRAP lurched violently to the left, driver dead or incapacitated, engine block shattered. It rolled twice before slamming into a ditch in a shriek of tortured metal and breaking glass. Before the echo even faded, gunfire erupted from the eastern ridge. A K-47's, PKM machine gun. The distinctive crack, crack, crack of well-aimed rifle fire. Contact right! Contact right! Cole was screaming into his radio. His earlier calm shattered. Lead vehicle is down! We're taking fire from... Another RPG streaked across the valley, this one aimed at the cargo truck. The driver saw it coming, jerked the wheel hard left. The rocket missed by meters, detonating against the valley floor in a shower of rock and sand, but the evasive maneuver sent the truck careening toward the ditch. It tipped, balanced on two wheels for a surreal moment, then crashed onto its side with a grinding crunch. Dismount! Dismount! Torres was already moving, kicking open the rear door of the MRAP. Reeves fumbled with his harness, fingers shaking. Where do we... Move! Torres grabbed him by the vest and physically hauled him toward the door. Cole's voice cut through the chaos. Technical vehicle, get to cover behind the second MRAP. Third Vic, form defensive perimeter. Return fire. Return fire. The response was immediate. Soldiers poured out of vehicles, taking positions behind tires and engine blocks. M4s started chattering back at the ridgeline. Jackson swung the .50 caliber around and sent a long burst toward the enemy positions, the heavy rounds chewing into rock and dirt. Elena stayed low, moved fast, and said nothing. She dropped out of the MRAP's rear door and immediately took cover behind the front wheel. Her tablet was already in her hand, booting up systems that most of the soldiers around her couldn't have imagined existed. Bullets snapped overhead. Somewhere, someone was screaming. The metallic stink of blood mixed with the acrid smell of burning fuel from the overturned cargo truck. Overwatch, Ghost Lead is weapons free, she said calmly into her hidden mic. Initiating combat protocol. Copy, Ghost Lead. We're tracking 12 to 15 hostile signatures on the eastern ridge. Secondary group of 6 on the western high ground, moving to cut off your retreat. You're in a textbook L-shaped ambush. Noted. Her fingers flew across the tablet. What assets do I have? 2 F-16S, call sign Hammer Flight, 11 minutes out at current speed. 1 MQ-9 Reaper with full Hellfire loadout, call sign Reaper 2-3, available immediately. Bring the Reaper in first. I need eyes and precision. Hold the fast movers until I call them. Roger. Reaper 2-3 is inbound. Elena's tablet screen lit up with a tactical overlay. The valley appeared in wireframe, enemy positions marked in red, friendly forces in blue. The Reaper's camera feed streamed in the corner, a god's eye view of the battlefield rendered in high-definition grayscale. She could see everything. The insurgent team on the eastern ridge had spread out in a skirmish line, using natural cover effectively. They were pouring fire into the convoy, but it was controlled, disciplined, not the wild spraying of amateurs. The Western team was moving fast, bounding from cover to cover, trying to get into position to enfilade the convoy's defensive line. And somewhere out there, Elena's eyes narrowed, there was a commander. Someone coordinating this. Someone smart enough to pick this exact location, this exact timing. Torres, Cole's voice cut through the gunfire. I need suppressive fire on that machine gun position. Grid 349er. Torres was already lining up the shot, her M4 barking in 3-round bursts. Beside her, Reeves was finally getting into the fight, his initial panic burning off into focused aggression. We're pinned, someone shouted from near the overturned cargo truck. 2 wounded. We can't move them. Cole's face was a mask of controlled fury. He grabbed his radio. Command, this is Groundhawk 3. We are in contact. Heavy contact. Multiple casualties. Request immediate QRF. Quick reaction force. The radio crackled back. Groundhawk 3, command copies. Be advised, nearest QRF is 30 minutes out. 30 minutes. In a firefight, that was an eternity. Cole's jaw clenched. Roger, we'll hold. But Elena could see what he couldn't. The Western team was almost in position. Once they opened up, the convoy's defensive line would collapse. They'd be taking fire from 2 sides, unable to maneuver, unable to retreat. This wasn't just an ambush, it was an execution. She made the decision in less than 2 seconds. Overwatch, I'm going active. A pause on the other end. Confirm? If you expose your position, I'm aware. But if I don't, we're looking at total loss. Another pause, then, confirmed. Ghost lead is active. Good hunting. Elena stood up. Not all the way. That would be suicide. But enough to catch Cole's attention. He was crouched behind the MRAP's rear tire, trying to coordinate fire teams while simultaneously watching for RPG launches. When he saw her standing there, calmly working a tablet while bullets snapped overhead, his expression went from focused to furious. What the hell are you doing? Get down! Sergeant Cole, Elena said, her voice cutting through the chaos with unexpected authority, I need you to consolidate your fire teams on the eastern ridge. Ignore the western element. Cole stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Are you insane? That western element is about to flank us. They won't get the chance. Lady, I don't know what the hell you think you're... Sergeant? Elena's voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Something in her tone made Cole stop mid-sentence. Focus all your fire on the eastern ridge. Machine gun positions first. I'll handle the western element. Handle them? With what? Elena didn't answer. Her fingers were already moving across the tablet, designating targets. The Reaper's targeting computer locked on to the Western team, 6 heat signatures moving through the rocks, completely exposed to the drone's high-altitude view. Reaper 2-3, Ghost lead. I'm painting targets now. Authorization code Whiskey Alpha 70. The drone operator's voice came back instantly. Ghost lead, Reaper 2-3 confirms authorization. I have 6 targets designated. Engaging with Hellfire. Time to impact, 45 seconds. 45 taudatus. Copy. Execute. 20 miles away and 4,000 feet up, a Hellfire missile dropped from the Reaper's wing pylon. Its rocket motor ignited. Guidance fins adjusted. The laser designator on Elena's tablet painted an invisible spot on the ground, and the missile rode that beam toward the target with mechanical precision. Cole was still staring at her. What did you just... Sergeant! Elena's voice cracked like a whip. Eastern Ridge! Now! Something in her tone, or maybe the absolute certainty in her eyes, made him react. He spun toward Torres. Torres! Reeves! Concentrate fire on the eastern positions. Jackson, I want that 50 cal chewing through their cover. The team responded instantly, shifting their fire. The volume of outgoing rounds increased dramatically. The insurgents on the eastern ridge, sensing the change, pressed their attack. More RPG rounds streaked across the valley. One hit the already destroyed lead MRAP, adding fresh flames to the wreckage. Another slammed into the ground near the defensive line, showering soldiers with debris. Elena watched her tablet's countdown timer. 30 seconds, 25, 20. Overwatch, I need an update on Hammer Flight. They're pushing hard, 8 minutes out. Not fast enough. The eastern element was too strong. Even with concentrated fire, the convoy couldn't suppress them for long. 15 seconds. Cole was screaming orders, trying to organize a coordinated volley. Torres had transitioned to her grenade launcher, pumping 40mm rounds toward the enemy machine gun nest. 10 seconds. Elena allowed herself a small breath. 5. The Western element never knew what hit them. The Hellfire missile arrived at supersonic speed, its 100-pound warhead detonating with perfect precision in the center of the insurgent formation. The explosion was surgical, far enough from the convoy to be safe, close enough to the enemy to be devastating. The shockwave rolled across the valley like an invisible fist. Rock and sand erupted into the air. The secondary explosions from enemy ammunition and weapons made the carnage even more complete. When the dust cleared 3 seconds later, the Western element had ceased to exist. The sudden silence from that direction was deafening. Cole's head snapped around, looking at the still settling dust cloud. "What the hell was—" "Sergeant," Elena said calmly, "the Western element is neutralized. You can focus all your assets on the east." He stared at her, really looked at her for the first time since the ambush began. "Who are you?" he asked slowly. Elena didn't answer. Her attention was on the tablet, already designating new targets. The Eastern element was reacting to the loss of their flanking team. Some were breaking position, trying to retreat. Others were doubling down, increasing their rate of fire. Their commander was making a choice, cut losses or commit fully. Elena watched 3 heat signatures moving together, one slightly ahead, 2 following. Leadership element. Interesting. Reaper 2-3, I'm designating a priority target. Leadership element. Eastern Ridge, coordinates uploading now. Ghost lead copy. I see them. Second Hellfire is ready. Negative on the Hellfire. Too close to their defensive positions, collateral damage would be minimal. Can you give me a close-up visual? The camera feed on her tablet zoomed in, switching to high magnification optical. Elena saw 3 figures in tactical gear, moving with purpose. The leader was gesturing, probably trying to reorganize the attack. Tactical radio in hand, scoped rifle slung over his shoulder. Professional. Overwatch, do we have signals intel on their radio traffic? Affirmative, they're using frequency-hopping burst comms, encrypted, but we're tracking the emissions. Can we jam it? Already working on it. Their next transmission cycle should be disrupted. Elena watched the leader on her screen. He raised the radio to his mouth, spoke. Nothing happened. He tried again. Confusion visible even in the grainy optical feed, and in that moment of confusion, his control slipped. The insurgent fire became ragged, less coordinated. Individual fighters starting to make their own decisions instead of following a plan. "Torres," Elena called out, "there's a leadership element at bearing 090, range approximately 400 meters, elevated position near the large boulder formation. Can you hit them with grenades?" Torres didn't question how this support specialist knew that. She just adjusted her M203 launcher and started dropping 40mm rounds onto the position with practiced accuracy. The first round impacted low. The second was close. The third landed directly in the target zone. Through the tablet feed, Elena watched the leadership element scatter, and just like that, the ambush fell apart. Without coordination, the Eastern element's fire became sporadic. Individual fighters started pulling back, realizing they'd lost their tactical advantage. Cole, sensing the shift, pressed the attack. "Advance by fire teams, suppress and maneuver. Don't let them reorganize." The convoy's soldiers, who minutes ago had been fighting for survival, now pushed forward with aggressive precision. Elena monitored it all through her tablet, making small adjustments, calling out positions, coordinating without seeming to coordinate. "Reaper 2-3, I need coverage on the northern exit route. Fleeing hostiles are heading for vehicles." "Copy. Ghost lead. I'm tracking 5 technical vehicles moving to exfil positions. Can you disable them without full destruction? I want prisoners if possible. I can put rounds through engine blocks." "Do it." The Reaper's 30mm cannon, usually used against hardened targets, spoke in short, precise bursts. Miles away, insurgent vehicles died with their engines blown apart, leaving the fleeing fighters stranded in the desert. The entire battle, from first shot to final surrender, lasted 17 minutes. When the gunfire finally stopped, The valley filled with an eerie quiet broken only by moaning wounded and the crackle of burning vehicles. Cole stood slowly, his weapon still raised, scanning for threats, finding none. His radio was already active. Command Groundhawk 3. Contact complete. We have secured the area. Multiple enemy KIA, some surrendering. We need immediate case vac for friendly wounded. Roger, Groundhawk 3. Medical evacuation is inbound. ETA 20 minutes. And Groundhawk, command is showing air support over your position. Did you request air support? Cole's eyes found Elena across the defensive perimeter. She was calmly packing up her tablet. Negative, command, Cole said slowly. We didn't request it. Understood. We'll sort that out later. Secure your perimeter and prepare for Casevac. Roger, out. Cole walked toward Elena, his boots crunching on spent brass casings. Torres and Reeves followed, both looking at the quiet woman with new eyes. That missile strike, Cole said. His voice was level, but his eyes were hard. That wasn't random. That wasn't friendly forces nearby. Someone called that in. Elena met his gaze steadily. Yes. Someone with access to air assets that don't appear on any of our communications. Yes. Someone who knew exactly where the enemy was before we did. Yes. Cole took a breath. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you? Elena considered her options. The mission parameters had been clear. Maintain cover, provide support without exposure, blend into the background. Those parameters had died the moment she'd gone active. Now she had a choice: lie and maintain a fiction that no one would believe, or give them enough truth to explain what they'd just seen. She chose a middle ground. My name is Elena Vance, she said quietly, and I'm not a support specialist. Yeah, Cole said dryly. I figured that part out. I'm what's called a tactical coordinator. I operate in ambiguous spaces, providing assets that officially don't exist to support operations that officially don't happen. Torres blinked. You're a spook. Elena smiled slightly. That's one term for it. And ghost lead? Cole asked. I heard you say that on the radio. My call sign. Reeves finally found his voice. You can just call in airstrikes? Just like that? When necessary, yes. Holy shit, he breathed. Cole was still processing. So this whole time, while we thought we were running a standard convoy op, we actually had our own personal tactical air controller riding along? Not exactly. I wasn't assigned to protect this convoy specifically. I was in the area. When intelligence indicated you might run into trouble, I attached myself to your unit. Elena paused. Without telling anyone what I actually do. Command knows? Someone high enough up the chain authorized my presence, but the specifics of my capabilities need to know basis. And we didn't need to know? You weren't supposed to be in a situation where it mattered. Cole's laugh was short and bitter. Yeah, well, plans change. Around them, the other survivors were beginning to regroup. Jackson climbed down from the gun turret, his face pale but determined. The medic was working on the wounded. 3 serious, 2 walking wounded. Could have been much worse. Should have been much worse. So what happens now? Torres asked. Elena glanced at the northern horizon where dust clouds marked the approach of medical helicopters. Now? The official story is that you fought off an ambush through superior tactics and training. The air support was a fortunate coincidence. Assets that happened to be in the area and responded to your distress call. That's bullshit, Cole said flatly. That's politics. And you? I disappear back into ambiguous spaces. Elena shouldered her pack. By the time you give your after-action report, I'll be reassigned. The support specialist who is attached to your convoy will be a different person in the paperwork. Someone forgettable. Forgettable? Cole shook his head. Lady, you just saved our lives. That's not forgettable. Then remember it quietly, Sergeant. The first helicopter appeared on the horizon, rotors beating the air into submission. Elena started walking toward the LZ landing zone that the team was marking with smoke. Cole called after her. Vance! She stopped, looked back. If you're ever in the area again, he said, and we're about to drive into a shitstorm, feel free to speak up earlier. Elena smiled, a real one this time. I'll keep that in mind. As she walked away, she touched her collar mic one final time. Overwatch, Ghost Lead, Operation Complete, requesting extraction. Copy, Ghost Lead. We have a bird inbound to your position, and nice work. Minimal friendly casualties, major enemy losses, and you stayed below the noise threshold. Command doesn't even know we were there. That's the job. That's the job, Overwatch agreed. See you at the next one. Elena found a quiet spot near the wreckage and waited for her ride. The convoy's survivors gave her a wide berth now, not out of fear, but out of a kind of respect that came from seeing someone operate on a level they hadn't known existed. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, turning the desert sky into bands of orange and red and purple, beautiful in a harsh way, the kind of beauty that only emerged in places where survival was uncertain. 20 minutes later, a black helicopter appeared, unmarked, unofficial, belonging to an organization that didn't officially exist. Elena climbed aboard without a backward glance. As the helicopter lifted off and Karif Valley fell away beneath her, she pulled out her tablet one last time. The after-action data was already uploading to encrypted servers. Analysis algorithms were processing the engagement, looking for patterns and lessons. Her phone buzzed. A text from her handler. 17 minutes from first contact to secure. New personal record. Drinks on me when you get back. Elena allowed herself a small smile and typed back, I'll hold you to that. Then she powered down the tablet, leaned back against the helicopter's vibrating wall, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow there would be debriefs and paperwork and the endless machinery of intelligence work. But tonight, 12 soldiers were alive because she'd been in the right place at the right time with the right assets. That was enough. More than enough. The helicopter banked east toward the setting sun, carrying Ghost Lead away from another battlefield she'd never be credited for winning. And below, in Karif Valley, Sergeant Mason Cole watched the unmarked helicopter disappear into the distance and wondered if he'd ever know the full story of the quiet woman who'd saved his life. The answer, of course, was no, but he'd remember her anyway. They all would. The black helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Griffin 47 minutes later, rotors still spinning as Elena ducked under the wash and jogged toward the operations building. The base was a sprawling complex of prefabricated structures and concrete barriers, home to approximately 300 personnel and more secrets than most of them would ever know about. Elena's handler was waiting inside the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, a climate-controlled bunker filled with monitors, communications equipment, and analysts who rarely saw sunlight. He was a lean man in his 50s named Marcus Webb, with silver hair and the kind of face that gave nothing away. "Welcome back," he said without looking up from his tablet. "Medical reports show 0 friendly KIA, 3 wounded but stable. Enemy losses estimated at 14 confirmed, 6 captured. I'd say that's a successful intervention." Elena dropped her gear on an empty desk. "It was sloppy. I should have spotted the ambush set up earlier. You spotted it in time. That's what matters." Webb finally looked at her. "The convoy commander, Sergeant Cole. He's asking questions." "I know. He's going to file a report." "Let him. The official story will handle it." Webb's expression suggested he wasn't convinced. "The problem with being Ghost Lead is that eventually people start noticing the ghost." Elena pulled off her tactical cap, running fingers through sweat-dampened hair. "You want me to disappear for a while? I want you to be careful. You're valuable, Elena. Too valuable to burn on convoy escorts." "The intelligence said the intelligence was wrong." Webb's voice hardened slightly. "That ambush was better organized than we expected. Professional, coordinated. Those weren't local insurgents taking potshots at a supply convoy." Elena went still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone knew that convoy was coming. Someone planned that attack with military precision, and someone is probably very unhappy that it failed." He paused, "which means they might start asking questions about why it failed." The implications settled over Elena like a cold blanket. Ghost Lead worked because nobody knew she existed. The moment someone started connecting dots, the mysterious air support, the precision strikes, the tactical coordination that appeared out of nowhere, her effectiveness dropped to 0. How long before they connect me to the intervention? Hard to say. Could be never. Could be already happening. Webb pulled up a file on his tablet. But we've got a more immediate problem. Elena didn't like the tone of that. Define problem. 3 hours ago, Signals Intelligence picked up chatter about a high-value target moving through the region. Someone important, someone who doesn't usually operate this far forward. Who? Webb showed her the tablet. The file photo was grainy, taken from a long-distance surveillance camera. It showed a man in his 40s, bearded, wearing traditional Afghan dress, but with the bearing of someone military-trained. Karim Nazari, Webb said. Former Afghan National Army, went over to the insurgency about 5 years ago. He's been building something in this region, not just fighters, but an actual network, infrastructure, supply lines. He's turning scattered cells into something that looks disturbingly like a professional military force. Elena studied the photo. And he's here? In Kharif province? According to Signals Intel, he's meeting with local commanders. Probably damage control after your little intervention destroyed one of his ambush teams. Webb swiped to another screen. But here's the interesting part. 2 days ago, a source, one of ours, Deep Cover, sent a message saying Nazari is planning something big, something that requires him to personally coordinate with multiple cells across the province. What kind of something? Unknown. The source went silent before providing details. Elena felt the familiar tingle of operational awareness. You think the source is compromised? I think the source is either compromised or discovered something so sensitive they had to go dark. Webb met her eyes. And I think we need to find out which. You want me to extract them. I want you to locate them, assess the situation, and then decide. If they're blown, we cut them loose. If they're sitting on actionable intelligence, we bring them in. Elena was already running calculations. Where was last contact? Small village called Kalat-e-Sharif, about 15 clicks northeast of here. Population maybe 200. Mix of farmers and insurgent sympathizers, Elena finished. I know it. Drove through there 6 months ago during a reconnaissance run. Then you know it's not friendly territory. Nothing in Kharif province is friendly territory. Webb allowed a thin smile. Fair point. He closed the tablet. You've got 12 hours to plan and prep. Insertion tomorrow at 0300. We'll have Overwatch support, but this is going to be low profile. No airstrikes, no cavalry waiting over the hill. Just you and whatever assets you can carry. Solo operation? Your specialty, as I recall. Elena nodded slowly. It was true. She worked best alone. No one to second-guess her decisions. No one to compromise operational security. Just her skills, her experience, and her ability to read situations that others missed. But solo operations in hostile territory had a way of going wrong in ways you couldn't plan for. What's the source's cover identity? She asked. Local merchant, spice trader, moves between villages conducting business, which gives him access to a wide network. Webb pulled up another file. Name is Hamid Karimi, 53 years old. He's been feeding us information for 3 years. Solid intelligence, careful tradecraft. Not the type to get sloppy. Everyone gets sloppy eventually. Not Hamid, which is why I'm worried. Elena memorized the face in the photo. Weathered features, intelligent eyes, the kind of person who'd learned to survive by being invisible. Like her. I'll need detailed satellite imagery of Kalat-e-Sharif, she said, updated within the last 48 hours. And I want signals intercepts from that area, any radio traffic, cell phone activity, anything that might indicate increased security presence. Already queued up. I'll have the intelligence package ready for you in 2 hours. An extraction plan? Flexible. If things go smooth, you walk out the same way you walked in. If things go loud, we have a backup exfil point 5 clicks south. Black helicopter will be on standby. Elena picked up her gear. Anything else I should know? Webb hesitated. That was unusual. He didn't usually hesitate. There's been chatter, he said carefully. About Ghost Lead. Elena froze. What kind of chatter? Nothing specific, just rumors. Stories about air support appearing out of nowhere, precision strikes that no one authorized, ambushes that fail for reasons local commanders can't explain. He met her eyes. People are starting to notice the pattern. People? Insurgent leadership. They're not stupid, Elena. They're starting to ask questions about why their carefully planned operations keep falling apart. The cold feeling in Elena's gut intensified. They think there's an American asset operating in the shadows. They think there's something. They don't know what. Not yet. Webb's expression was grim. But if they put together enough pieces, they're going to start hunting for you specifically, and that makes every operation exponentially more dangerous. Elena absorbed that. She'd always known this day would come, the day when being a ghost wasn't enough anymore, when the pattern became visible, when the enemy started looking for her. How long do I have before that becomes a critical problem? She asked. Hard to say. Could be weeks. Could be days. Webb shrugged. That's why we need to move fast on this source. If Hamid has intelligence about Nazari's plans, we might be able to disrupt the network before they get organized enough to start hunting for ghosts. Elena nodded. I'll be ready. She turned to leave, but Webb's voice stopped her. Elena? She looked back. If this goes sideways, he said quietly, if you're compromised, you know the protocol. She did. Ghost Lead didn't get captured. Ghost Lead didn't get interrogated. Ghost Lead ceased to exist before that became an option. Understood, she said. Then she walked out into the brutal afternoon heat to begin planning an operation that might get her killed. The intelligence package was waiting in her quarters 2 hours later, exactly as promised. Elena spread the contents across her bunk. Satellite photos, signals intercepts, terrain maps, and a detailed dossier on Hamid Karimi that filled in the blanks Webb had left out. Hamid had been recruited after his son was killed in a Taliban bombing. The rage and grief had driven him to reach out to American intelligence, offering information in exchange for nothing more than the satisfaction of hurting the people who'd destroyed his family. 3 years later, he was still providing intelligence, still moving through insurgent networks like water through sand. Until 2 days ago, when he'd sent a coded message saying he'd discovered something urgent about Karim Nazari and then disappeared. Elena studied the satellite imagery of Kalat-e-Sharif. The village was arranged in the traditional pattern, compounds, clustered around a central mosque, with agricultural fields spreading outward in irregular patches. The main road ran north-south, connecting to larger routes that led to the provincial capital. 3 locations stood out as possible safe houses or meeting points. Hamid's known residence was on the western edge of the village, a modest compound with thick walls and a single entrance. But if he'd gone to ground, he wouldn't be there. Elena marked 2 other possibilities: a warehouse near the market square, used for storing grain, and an abandoned shepherd's hut about a click outside the village proper. Both offered concealment and multiple escape routes. The signal's intercepts told a different story. Radio traffic in the area had spiked significantly over the past 48 hours, encrypted bursts on frequencies associated with insurgent command networks. Someone was coordinating something, moving pieces into position. A knock on her door interrupted her analysis. "Come in," she called without looking up. The door opened. Sergeant Mason Cole stood in the doorway, his uniform still dusty from the ambush earlier. He looked tired and wired at the same time, the aftermath of combat adrenaline. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sergeant, I didn't expect to see you again." "Yeah, well." Cole stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. "I had some questions that the official debrief didn't answer." Elena set down the satellite photo she'd been examining. "I'm not sure I can help with that." "Cut the crap, Vance." Cole's voice was blunt, but not hostile. "I've been doing this long enough to know when I'm being fed a line. That air support today didn't just happen to be in the area. You called it in, specifically, with assets that aren't on any of our operational charts. If you're looking for confirmation, I'm not looking for confirmation. I know what I saw." He crossed his arms. "What I'm looking for is context, because that level of coordination, that kind of precision, that's not standard support. That's something else entirely." Elena regarded him carefully. Cole wasn't stupid. He'd put together enough pieces to be dangerous, or useful, depending on how she played this. "What do you want, Sergeant?" "I want to know if we're going to see you again. If my team is going to be operating in the same theater as whatever the hell you are, I want to know about it, so I can prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For the fact that the enemy might be looking for you." Cole's expression was serious. You said it yourself, patterns become visible. If insurgent leadership starts connecting the dots, anyone associated with you becomes a target. It was a fair point, one Elena had already considered. Your concern is noted, she said carefully, but Ghost Lead operates independently. Your team won't be compromised by association. That's not how it works, and you know it. Cole stepped closer. That convoy today? The one you saved? 2 of my soldiers died in the lead vehicle, 3 more are wounded, and now I've got to write reports explaining how we survived an ambush that should have killed us all. So write that you fought well and got lucky. Lucky. Cole's laugh was bitter. Lucky that a mysterious support specialist nobody had ever heard of happened to have access to air assets that appeared in under 2 minutes. Lucky that precision strikes hit enemy positions we couldn't even see. Lucky that, Sergeant, Elena's voice cut through his building frustration. I understand your anger, but the alternative was that your entire team died in that valley. Would you prefer that outcome? The bluntness of it stopped him cold. No, he said finally. No, I wouldn't. Then accept the official story and move on. Cole was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. How long have you been doing this? Elena considered not answering, but something in Cole's demeanor reminded her of why she'd started this work in the first place. To protect soldiers like him, soldiers who did the hard work of fighting wars while people like her operated in the shadows. 7 years, she said, give or take. And how many interventions? Enough to lose count. Cole absorbed that. So we're not special, just another op in a long list. Every operation is special to the people who survive it, Sergeant. He met her eyes. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. Another silence. Then Cole's expression shifted slightly, from confrontational to something more contemplative. The wounded soldiers from the convoy, he said, they're going to be okay. Medical says full recovery for all 3. That's good. Yeah. He paused. One of them, Private Jackson, the gunner, he asked me who called in the air support, said he wanted to thank them. Elena felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. Tell him it was a team effort. That's a cop-out. That's the truth. I don't operate alone, Sergeant. I'm just the visible part of a much larger system. Cole nodded slowly. Fair enough? He turned toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. What? If you're going out there again, into hostile territory, solo operation, whatever classified nightmare you people dream up, watch your back, because if the enemy is starting to look for patterns, they're going to find you eventually. I'm aware of the risk. Are you? Cole's expression was hard. Because from where I'm standing, you just painted a target on yourself. And the thing about targets is that sooner or later, someone takes a shot. He left without waiting for a response. Elena stood alone in her quarters, Cole's warning echoing in her mind. He was right, of course. Every intervention left traces. Every successful operation added to the pattern. Eventually, someone smart enough and motivated enough would connect the dots. Maybe they already had. She turned back to the intelligence package, pushing the thought aside. Right now, she had a mission to plan. Hamid Karimi was out there somewhere, alive, dead, or captured, and she needed to find out which before Nazari's network disappeared into the infrastructure of the province. The next 6 hours were spent in meticulous preparation. Elena assembled her loadout with the care of someone whose life depended on every item. Suppressed Glock 19, compact M4 carbine with thermal sight, ceramic plate carrier, encrypted radio with satellite uplink, medical kit, 3 days of high-calorie rations, and enough ammunition to fight her way out of most situations. She also packed items that weren't standard military issue. A set of local civilian clothes, Afghan currency, a worn copy of the Quran for cultural camouflage, and a small leather pouch containing what she quietly called her last resort, a single cyanide capsule, just in case capture became inevitable. She'd never had to use it. She hoped tomorrow wouldn't change that. At 2200 hours, she attended the final briefing with Webb and the intelligence team. The plan was straightforward on paper. Insert via helicopter 5 clicks south of Kalat-i-Sharif, move overland to the village under cover of darkness, locate Hamid, or determine his status, extract any intelligence he'd gathered, and exfil before dawn. Simple. Except nothing in Kharif province was ever simple. Latest signals intel shows increased radio traffic around the village, one of the analysts reported. Could be normal activity, could be a security sweep. Any indication they're looking for someone specifically? Elena asked. Negative, but the pattern suggests heightened alert status. Webb leaned forward, which means either they know Hamid is a source and they're hunting for him, or they're preparing for something else entirely. Or both, Elena said. Or both, Webb agreed. Which is why you're going in light and fast. Recon the situation, make your assessment, act accordingly. Elena nodded. Rules of engagement? Avoid contact if possible. If contact is unavoidable, suppress and evade. This is an intelligence gathering op, not a combat mission. And if I find Hamid but he's being held? Webb's expression hardened. Then you use your judgment. But remember, one source isn't worth compromising Ghost Lead's existence. The cold calculus of intelligence work. One life weighed against operational security. Elena had made that calculation before. It never got easier. Understood, she said. The briefing ended at 2300 hours. Elena returned to her quarters for one last equipment check, then tried to sleep. It was a skill she'd developed over years of operations, the ability to shut down her mind and rest, even knowing that the next day might be her last. At 02:45 hours, her alarm buzzed. Elena was already awake. She dressed in the darkness, every movement practiced and efficient. The familiar weight of armor and weapons settled onto her frame like a second skin. She checked her radio encryption codes, verified her GPS coordinates, and made sure the satellite uplink was functioning. At 02:55, she walked to the helicopter landing pad where the Blackbird was already spinning up its rotors. Webb was waiting there, his face shadowed in the pre-dawn darkness. Remember, he said over the rotor noise, if this goes bad, we never had this conversation. You were never here. Ghost Lead doesn't exist. I know the drill, Marcus. He handed her a small device, a GPS beacon with a single button. Emergency extraction. Press this and we'll have birds in the air in 3 minutes, but use it only as a last resort. The moment you activate it, everyone in a 30-click radius will know exactly where you are. Elena clipped it to her vest. Anything else? Webb hesitated again. That same pause from earlier, like he was weighing whether to say something. What? Elena prompted. Just be careful out there. You're one of the best operators I've ever worked with. I'd hate to lose you to bad luck. Elena allowed a small smile. I don't believe in luck, Marcus. Only preparation. Yeah, well, prepare for everything then. She climbed into the helicopter. The crew chief gave her a thumbs up, and the bird lifted off into the darkness, rotors beating against the night air. Below, forward operating base Griffin fell away, a pool of light in an ocean of darkness. Then even that disappeared as the helicopter banked northeast, following terrain contours to avoid radar detection. Elena checked her weapons one final time, ran through her infiltration plan, and watched the landscape scroll past beneath her. Somewhere out there in that darkness was a man who knew something important enough to risk his life for. And somewhere else was an enemy leader who was building something dangerous enough to require personal coordination. Her job was to find the first and gather intelligence on the second, without being seen, without being caught, without leaving any trace that Ghost Lead had been there at all. The helicopter began its descent 15 minutes later, flaring hard and fast into a shallow wadi, dry riverbed, that provided concealment from the surrounding terrain. Elena jumped out before the skids even touched ground, moving immediately toward cover. The helicopter was gone 10 seconds later, disappearing into the night like it had never existed. Elena was alone. She activated her night vision goggles, and the darkness transformed into a green-tinted landscape of rocks and scrub brush. The village of Khalat-e-Sharif was 5 clicks northeast, about an hour's walk at tactical pace. She started moving, keeping to the low ground, avoiding skylines, reading the terrain with the instincts of someone who'd learned to survive in hostile territory. The night was silent except for the whisper of wind and the distant bark of a dog. Elena's breathing was steady. Her pulse was controlled. Her mind was focused. This was what she was trained for, This was what she was good at. And somewhere ahead, in a village that didn't want her there, was a man who might hold the key to stopping something terrible before it began. She just had to find him before someone else did. The walk took 53 minutes. Elena approached Khalati Sharif from the south, moving slowly through irrigation ditches and using agricultural walls for concealment. The village was dark, no streetlights, no electricity beyond a few generator-powered compounds. Perfect conditions for infiltration. She circled the perimeter, observing. 3 vehicles were parked near the central mosque, technical trucks with mounted machine guns, not normal for a farming village. Security presence. Elena's pulse quickened slightly. Webb had been right. Something was happening here. She moved closer using shadows and silence until she could hear voices. 2 men talking in Pashto near one of the trucks. She caught fragments of the conversation. Told us to watch for anyone unusual. American woman, they said. How would we even know? Elena's blood went cold. They were looking for her, not just for a source, not just for a spy, for Ghost Lead, specifically. Elena didn't move, didn't breathe. Every muscle in her body locked into absolute stillness as the implications crashed through her tactical awareness like a freight train. They knew. Not just that there was an American operative in the area, not just that intelligence assets were active in the province. They knew about her, specifically. A woman. Which meant someone had connected the pattern. Someone had analyzed the ambush failures, the precision strikes, the tactical coordination that appeared out of nowhere, and someone had started putting together a profile. The 2 guards continued talking, their voices carrying across the quiet village square. The commander said she might try to contact the spy tonight. What spy? The merchant, Karimi. They found messages on his phone, coded, but the technical team broke the encryption. Elena's jaw clenched. Hamid was compromised. Completely. Which meant this entire village was a trap. And she'd walked right into it. Her hand moved to the emergency beacon on her vest. 1 press and extraction would be inbound. 3 minutes to pick up. But 3 minutes in a hostile village crawling with security forces who were specifically looking for her? She might as well paint a target on her back. The guard shifted position. One of them pulled out a cigarette, the lighter's flame briefly illuminating hard features and the distinctive outline of an AK-47 slung over his shoulder. I heard Nazari himself ordered the search, the smoker said. He's convinced this American woman is the reason his operations keep failing. One woman? That's what they're saying. One woman who coordinates everything, airstrikes, drones, intelligence, like she's running her own war from the shadows. The other guard laughed, a harsh, skeptical sound. Sounds like propaganda to me. Americans trying to scare us with ghost stories. Maybe, but I've seen the orders. Every checkpoint in the province is watching for a foreign woman traveling alone. And if she's found, he drew his finger across his throat. Elena's mind raced through options. She could retreat, slip back into the darkness, and abort the mission. Report that Hamid was compromised and the intelligence had been lost. Live to fight another day. But that would leave Hamid to whatever interrogation Nazari had planned. And more importantly, it would confirm that Ghost Lead existed. That she could be hunted. That she could be scared off. The moment she ran, she lost the psychological advantage that had kept her invisible for 7 years. No, running wasn't an option, which left the hard choice. She touched her collar mic, activating the encrypted frequency that connected her directly to Webb. Overwatch, Ghost Lead, she whispered, barely audible. I'm compromised. Village is a trap. They know I'm here. Webb's response came back instantly, his voice tense. Say again? They know Ghost Lead specifically? Affirmative. Security forces are conducting active search for American female operative. Hamid is blown. They broke his encryption. A pause. Then, recommend immediate abort. I'm spinning up extraction now. Elena watched the 2 guards. Watched the village. Calculated angles and distances and probabilities. Negative, she said quietly. Elena, this is not a debate. If they've identified the pattern, then we change the pattern. Her voice was calm, cold, the tone of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be argued out of it. If I run now, it confirms everything they suspect. But if I complete the mission despite their security presence, it sends a different message. What message? That you're suicidal? That Ghost Lead doesn't run, that their countermeasures don't work, that they're still vulnerable even when they think they're ready. She paused. Fear is a weapon, Marcus. Right now they're using it against me. Time to turn that around. Webb was silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried a mixture of resignation and respect. This is insane. This is necessary. If you get captured, I won't. Elena was already moving, sliding deeper into the shadows as one of the guards started walking in her direction. Keep the extraction bird on standby. I'll signal when I'm ready for pickup. Elena. She killed the connection. The guard was 20 meters away now, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. He was young, maybe early 20s, and despite his weapon, he moved with the cautious uncertainty of someone who hadn't seen real combat. Good. Elena waited until he was 15 meters away. 10. She could see the nervous way he kept licking his lips, the way his fingers stayed outside the trigger guard. 5 meters. She stepped out of the shadows. The guard's eyes went wide. His mouth opened to shout an alarm. His rifle started to come up. Elena covered the distance in 3 silent strides. Her hand clamped over his mouth before any sound escaped. Her other hand twisted the rifle away with practiced efficiency. And then her knee drove into his solar plexus with enough force to paralyze his diaphragm. He went down without making a sound louder than a wheeze. Elena caught him before he hit the ground, dragging him into the shadows. She zip-tied his hands and feet, gagged him with a strip of cloth torn from his own shirt, and left him propped against a wall where he'd be found eventually, but not immediately. The second guard was still smoking, oblivious. Elena picked up the captured AK-47, checked the chamber, loaded, safety off, and set it down quietly. She didn't need it. Drawing a weapon would escalate the situation beyond her control. She needed information first, action second. Moving like smoke, she circled around the mosque, using her night vision to map the security presence. 6 guards total, 2 at the mosque, 2 patrolling the main road, 2 positioned near what her intelligence package had identified as Hamid's residence. The residence guards were different, older, more alert. They stood with the relaxed readiness of professionals who knew what they were doing, which probably meant Hamid was inside. Dead or alive was the question. Elena found a position 30 meters from the compound, concealed behind a low wall that separated 2 agricultural plots. She pulled out a directional microphone, a piece of equipment the size of a smartphone that could pick up conversations through walls. She aimed it at the compound's main building. At first, nothing. Then voices. 3 people. 2 speaking Pashto, 1 speaking Dari. The Dari speaker sounded older, tired. That would be Hamid. Don't know what you're talking about. His voice was strained, pain and exhaustion bleeding through the words. The messages on your phone say otherwise. A different voice. Younger. Authoritative. You've been feeding intelligence to the Americans for years. Don't insult me by denying it now. Those messages were business. The sound of a fist hitting flesh, a grunt of pain. Try again. Silence. Then Hamid's voice, quieter now. What do you want from me? I want to know about the American woman. The one who coordinates the airstrikes. The one who destroyed my ambush team in Karif Valley yesterday. Elena's breath caught. So Nazari had connected that specific operation to Ghost Lead's pattern. I don't know any American woman, Hamid said. Your messages reference a coordinator, someone who provides targeting information, someone who has access to military assets that regular American forces don't use. I told you, those were business. Another impact, this one, harder. Hamid cried out. Last chance, the interrogator said. Tell me about Ghost Lead. The code name. They had the actual code name. Elena's mind raced. How? How had they gotten that specific piece of intelligence? Ghost Lead was compartmentalized beyond anything normal. Even most of the American military didn't know that call sign existed. Unless there was a leak. Someone in the intelligence chain feeding information to the enemy. But that was a problem for later. Right now, Hamid was being tortured for information he probably didn't even have. Elena's sources were never told about Ghost Lead directly. They were given contact protocols and coded instructions, but never the full picture, which meant Hamid could be tortured for hours and still have nothing to give them. Elena touched her collar mic again. Overwatch, Ghost Lead. Hamid is alive, currently under interrogation by suspected hostile commander, possibly Nazari himself. They're asking about Ghost Lead by name. Webb's response was immediate and sharp. They have the code name? Affirmative, which means we have a security breach somewhere in the chain. That's concerning. Webb's talent for understatement would have been funny under different circumstances. Recommendation? Elena watched the compound. 2 guards outside. Unknown number inside. At least 2 interrogators plus Hamid. Against someone with her training, those weren't impossible odds, but impossible and suicidal occupied a narrow spectrum. I'm going to extract him, she said. Elena, no. That's exactly what they want you to do. This is a trap designed to force Ghost Lead into the open. I know. Then why? Because Hamid has information about Nazari's plans. Information important enough that he went dark to protect it. And because if I leave him to be tortured, every other source in our network will know that we abandon our people when things get difficult. Sources are expendable. You're not. Everyone's expendable, Marcus. That's the job. Elena started moving toward the compound, keeping to the shadows. Besides, they're expecting Ghost Lead to act like an invisible coordinator, someone who calls in assets and disappears. They're not expecting me to walk through their front door. That's because it's insane. Maybe, but it's also the last thing they'll anticipate. She paused at the compound wall, approximately 2 meters high, topped with broken glass embedded in concrete. I'm going silent for the next few minutes. If you don't hear from me in 10, assume I'm captured and burn all connections to this operation. Elena! She killed the connection again. The wall was easy enough to bypass. She found a section where the glass had fallen away and pulled herself up and over in one smooth motion. Landing silently on the other side, she drew her suppressed Glock and moved toward the main building. The 2 guards outside were facing outward, watching for external threats. They weren't expecting someone to come from inside the compound. Elena approached from behind, moving across the courtyard with absolute silence. 5 meters? 3. 1. The first guard never knew she was there. The suppressed Glock made a sound like a heavy book dropping on a table. 2 rounds center mass. He folded without a sound. The second guard started to turn, some 6th sense warning him of danger. Too late. Elena's rounds caught him in the chest before his rifle even moved. He dropped beside his partner, dead before he hit the ground. 2 down. Elena reached the door to the main building. She could hear voices inside clearly now. Hamid's interrogator was still asking questions, his tone growing more frustrated. She tested the door handle. Unlocked. Of course it was. Why would they lock a door when they thought they controlled the entire village? Elena took a breath. What she was about to do crossed every line in the Covert Operations Handbook. No backup, no support, no escape plan beyond improvisation and violence. But Hamid was in there, and somewhere in his head was intelligence that might stop whatever Nazari was planning. That was worth the risk. She pushed the door open. The room beyond was lit by a single kerosene lamp hanging from the ceiling. Hamid sat in a chair in the center, his face bloodied, hands bound behind him. 2 men stood over him, one holding a rifle loosely, the other with hands still clenched in fists from the beating he'd been delivering. All 3 turned toward the door as Elena entered. For a frozen moment, nobody moved. Then recognition flashed across the interrogator's face. You... Elena shot him twice in the chest. The rifleman was faster than the guards outside. Combat veteran reflexes, bringing his weapon up with professional speed. But Elena was already moving, sidestepping as she fired. Her rounds took him in the shoulder and throat. He went down choking on his own blood. The room filled with the smell of cordite and copper. Hamid stared at Elena with wide, disbelieving eyes. You're... He spoke in English, his accent thick but understandable. You're the American woman they're looking for. Right now, I'm the American woman getting you out of here. Elena moved quickly to cut his bonds. Can you walk? I think so. Hamid stood shakily, testing his legs. But the village, they have men everywhere. We'll never make it out. Let me worry about that. Elena pulled her radio. Overwatch, Ghost Lead, I have the package. Requesting immediate extraction, primary LZ. Webb's voice came back, tight with controlled urgency. Negative on primary LZ. We're showing multiple heat signatures converging on your position. They heard the shots. Of course they had. Suppressors reduce sound, they didn't eliminate it. And in a quiet village at night, even reduced gunfire was enough to alert anyone within 100 meters. Alternate LZ? Elena asked. There's a field approximately 300 meters northwest of your position. Open ground, minimal cover, but it's the closest we can manage. 300 meters. Not far normally, but with an injured civilian and hostile forces actively searching, that was going to be interesting. Copy. Moving to alternate LZ now. Elena looked at Hamid. Can you run? If the alternative is staying here, I can fly. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. Running will be sufficient. Stay close and do exactly what I say. She moved to the door, checking the courtyard beyond. Clear for now, but she could hear shouting in the distance. Boots on gravel, the distinctive sound of rifle bolts being worked. The alarm had been raised. Elena pulled a flashbang grenade from her vest, one of 3 she'd brought, not expecting to need them. She stepped into the courtyard and threw it toward the compound entrance, then immediately pulled Hamid in the opposite direction, toward the rear wall. The flashbang detonated with a crack and a brilliant flash of light that turned night into day for half a second. Shouts of confusion erupted from the entrance. Men who'd been converging on the compound were suddenly blind and disoriented. Elena boosted Hamid over the rear wall, then vaulted after him. They landed in a narrow alley that ran between compounds, the walls on either side high enough to provide concealment from casual observation. Northwest, Elena said, consulting her mental map of the village. We need to reach the agricultural fields. Move fast, but quiet. They ran. Behind them, the village was waking up like an angry hornet's nest. Voices shouting orders, engines starting, the sound of coordinated security forces mobilizing. Elena and Hamid moved through the darkness, using alleys and agricultural walls for concealment. Twice they had to freeze as patrols passed within meters of their position. Each time, Elena's hand was on her pistol, ready to shoot if they were spotted. Each time, the patrols moved on without seeing them. They reached the edge of the village 8 minutes after leaving the compound. The agricultural field stretched ahead, 300 meters of open ground with minimal cover. Elena could hear the helicopter now. Distant, but getting closer. The distinctive thump of rotor blades cutting through night air, but she could also hear vehicles behind them. Multiple engines, search parties fanning out. Can you sprint? She asked Hamid. He nodded, breathing hard. Yes. Then run. Don't stop for anything. They broke from cover and ran across the field. Almost immediately, shouts erupted behind them. Someone had spotted their movement. Rifle fire cracked across the night. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Elena didn't return fire. Every second spent shooting was a second not spent running. And right now, speed was survival. Bullets snapped through the air around them. One passed close enough that Elena felt the pressure wave against her cheek. Hamid stumbled, nearly fell, caught himself, and kept running. The helicopter was closer now. Elena could see its dark silhouette against the slightly lighter sky. No lights, no markings, just a shadow dropping toward the earth. 200 meters. More rifle fire. This volley was more accurate. Someone had corrected for range and wind. Hamid cried out and went down. Elena spun, grabbing him under the arms and hauling him upright. Where are you hit? Leg. I can still... He tried to put weight on it and nearly collapsed. No time for field medicine. Elena pulled Hamid's arm over her shoulder and half-carried, half-dragged him toward the LZ. Her legs burned. Her lungs screamed. But she kept moving. 100 meters. The helicopter flared hard, nose up, settling into a hover just above the ground. The side door was already open. A crew chief visible in the opening with a mounted machine gun. Vehicles burst from the village edge. Technical trucks with mounted weapons. They opened fire, tracers streaking across the field like deadly fireflies. The helicopter's door gunner returned fire, his .50 caliber machine gun roaring. The heavy rounds tore into the lead technical, shredding metal and flesh. The truck swerved wildly and crashed into an irrigation ditch. 50 meters. Elena could see the crew chief gesturing urgently, could feel the rotor wash buffeting her, could hear the scream of the turbine engines. 20 meters. More rifle fire. Something tugged at Elena's vest. A round that would have killed her if not for the ceramic plate. The impact felt like getting hit with a sledgehammer. She kept moving. 10 meters. The crew chief was leaning out, hand extended. 5 meters. Elena literally threw Hamid toward the helicopter. The crew chief caught him, hauling him into the cabin. Then Elena was diving through the door, rolling across the metal floor as the pilot pulled pitch and the helicopter clawed for altitude. Bullets pinged off the fuselage. The door gunner kept firing, laying down suppressive fire that forced the remaining technical trucks to break off their pursuit. And then they were airborne, climbing hard and fast, the village of Khalat-i-Sharif falling away beneath them. Elena lay on the floor of the helicopter, breathing hard, feeling the adrenaline crash starting to hit. Her side hurt where the round had impacted her plate carrier. Her muscles were jelly. Her ears were ringing from gunfire and engine noise. But she was alive. They both were. The crew chief was already working on Hamid's leg, applying a tourniquet and pressure bandage. The wound was messy but not life-threatening, through and through in the calf muscle, missing the major arteries. Lucky. Elena pulled herself upright and activated her radio. Overwatch, Ghost Lead, package is secure. Inbound to your location. Webb's voice came back, and she could hear the relief underneath his professional tone. Copy, Ghost Lead. Good work. We'll have medical standing by. Appreciated. Elena looked at Hamid, who was watching her with an expression somewhere between shock and awe. Make sure we also have a debrief team ready. The package has information. Confirmed. Debrief team is already assembled. Elena killed the connection and met Hamid's eyes. Thank you, he said in English. They would have killed me. They would have tortured you first, then killed you. So yes, you're welcome. Elena pulled off her helmet, running a hand through sweat-soaked hair. But we're not done yet. I need to know what you discovered about Nazari. What was important enough that you went dark? Hamid glanced at the crew chief, then back to Elena. Not here. Too many ears. The crew is cleared. Not for this. Hamid's voice dropped to barely audible. What I found, if it's true, it changes everything. Elena felt a cold finger of premonition trace down her spine. Tell me. Hamid hesitated, then leaned closer. His voice was a whisper barely audible over the helicopter noise. Nazari isn't building an insurgent network. He's building an army, a real army, with heavy weapons, artillery, anti-aircraft systems, and he's getting support from outside the country, professional military advisors, modern equipment. Elena's blood went cold. From who? I don't know exactly, but I saw shipments, weapons crates with Cyrillic markings, men speaking Russian. Hamid's eyes were haunted. And there's a timeline. Something big is coming, something that requires all this buildup. When? 3 weeks, maybe less. What's the target? I don't know. Hamid winced as the crew chief adjusted his bandage. But Nazari mentioned Kabul, and he said something else. Something that made me go dark immediately. What? Hamid met her eyes. He said that when it's done, the Americans will finally understand what it means to be truly afraid. That Ghost Lead won't be able to stop what's coming. The helicopter banked hard, heading back toward forward operating base Griffin, and Elena sat in the darkness, processing what she'd just heard. An army. Heavy weapons. Russian support. An operation targeting Kabul in 3 weeks. And Nazari knew about Ghost Lead specifically, was planning something that he believed could neutralize her effectiveness. This wasn't just another insurgent operation. This was something bigger, something that could change the entire strategic picture in the region. And she'd just painted an even larger target on herself by conducting an extraction that confirmed everything the enemy suspected about Ghost Lead's capabilities. The helicopter touched down at Griffin 23 minutes later. 3 months. Medical personnel were waiting, hustling Hamid away to the base hospital. Webb was there too, his expression grim. We need to talk, he said. Elena nodded, following him into the TOC. The space was crowded with analysts and officers, all of them watching screens showing various intelligence feeds. Webb led her to a secure conference room and closed the door. You went in alone against an entire security force and extracted a compromised asset from active interrogation, he said without preamble. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 20 years of intelligence work. It was necessary. It was insane. Webb rubbed his eyes. But it worked, which is the only reason I'm not having you pulled from the field right now. Elena dropped into a chair, suddenly feeling every bruise and strain from the operation. Hamid has information. Nazari is planning something major. 3 weeks out. Possible target is Kabul. Webb went very still. Kabul? That's what Hamid said, and he mentioned Russian support, heavy weapons. This isn't just another insurgent cell. Marcus. Webb was already pulling out his secure phone, typing rapidly. I need to brief this up the chain immediately. If there's a credible threat against Kabul, there's more. Elena met his eyes. Nazari mentioned Ghost Lead specifically, by name. He said what he's planning will make me irrelevant, that I won't be able to stop it. Webb stopped typing. He knows you're trying to stop him? He knows someone called Ghost Lead is disrupting his operations, and he's building something designed to counter that threat. Elena leaned forward. Which means whatever he's planning, it's not just about the target. It's about proving that our invisible warfare doesn't work, that he can operate despite our best efforts. Webb struggled for words. That's a propaganda victory waiting to happen. If he succeeds, every insurgent group in the region will know that American intelligence can be defeated. If he succeeds, yes. Elena's voice was hard. So we make sure he doesn't. Webb looked at her for a long moment. You realize what you're saying. You're talking about going after Nazari directly, not just disrupting his operations, actually hunting him. Yes? That's not what Ghost Lead does. You're a coordinator, not an assassin. I'm whatever the mission requires me to be. Elena stood, ignoring the protest from her bruised ribs. Nazari has made this personal. He's studying me, learning my patterns, building countermeasures. The only way to stop that is to change the game entirely. By becoming the threat instead of the shadow. Exactly. Webb was silent for several seconds. Then he nodded slowly. I'll brief command. But Elena, if you're going after Nazari directly, you're going to need more than just air support and good luck. I know. I'm going to need a team. A team? Webb's eyebrows rose. You've operated solo for 7 years. And for 7 years, I've been effective because nobody knew I existed. That advantage is gone now. Nazari knows about Ghost Lead. He's hunting for me specifically, and a single operator, no matter how good, can't fight an entire army. So what are you proposing? Elena thought about Sergeant Cole, about Torres and Reeves and the other soldiers who'd fought in Karif Valley, about the way they'd adapted once they understood what was happening. I'm proposing we build a different kind of team, small, highly trained, cleared for the kind of operations that don't officially exist. She met Webb's eyes. And I'm proposing we use that team to take Nazari down before whatever he's planning goes live. Webb considered that. You're talking about a direct action mission, spec ops territory. That's way beyond your current operational parameters. My current operational parameters just got shredded the moment Nazari learned my code name. Elena's voice was calm but implacable. We can either adapt or we can watch him execute whatever nightmare he's planning. Your choice. Webb pulled out his phone again. I'll need to run this up the chain. This kind of mission authorization has to come from very high up. How long? 48 hours, maybe less if I can get the right people to pay attention. We don't have 48 hours. We have 3 weeks, and Hamid said maybe less. I know, but I can't just... Webb stopped as his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression changed. Hold on. He answered the call, listened for 30 seconds, said understood twice, and hung up. When he looked at Elena again, his expression was different, harder. That was the deputy director, he said. Seems Signals Intelligence just picked up communications confirming what Hamid told you. Multiple Russian advisors in the region, heavy weapons shipments, and chatter about a major operation targeting coalition forces. So I was right. You were right. Webb paused. And the deputy director has authorized a direct action operation to neutralize the threat. You're cleared to assemble a team and execute at your discretion. Elena felt something shift inside her. For 7 years, she'd operated in the shadows, coordinating, supporting, invisible. Now she was being asked to step into the light. I'll need operational assets, weapons, equipment, intelligence support. You'll have whatever you need. Webb's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it and cursed under his breath. And apparently, you'll have it faster than expected. The deputy director is flying in tomorrow to personally brief you on the mission parameters. The deputy director is coming here? To Griffin? This just became the highest priority operation in theater. Webb met her eyes. Welcome to the front lines, Ghost Lead. You're not a shadow anymore. Elena absorbed that. The weight of it. The implications. For 7 years, she'd been invisible. Now she was about to become the most visible target in Kharif province. And somewhere out there, Karim Nazari was building an army specifically designed to prove that Ghost Lead could be defeated. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was war. The deputy director arrived at 0600 hours the next morning in a helicopter that made Elena's unmarked extraction bird look like a civilian tour vehicle. This one was a modified Black Hawk with electronic countermeasures, armored plating, and enough classified equipment to fill a Pentagon basement. Elena stood on the tarmac watching it land, her body still aching from the previous night's extraction. She'd managed 3 hours of sleep, not enough, but more than she'd expected given the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Webb stood beside her, looking equally exhausted. He'd spent the night coordinating with Washington, pulling together intelligence reports, and trying to build an operational framework around what had suddenly become the most important mission in theater. The helicopter's rotors began to slow. The side door opened. Deputy Director Sarah Chen stepped out. Elena had met her exactly once, 7 years ago during her initial Ghost Lead recruitment. Chen was in her late 50s with short gray hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of presence that made generals uncomfortable. She'd spent 20 years in Special Activities Division before moving into intelligence leadership, which meant she understood operations from the ground up. She walked toward Elena and Webb with the purposeful stride of someone who didn't waste time on ceremony. "Agent Vance," she said, extending her hand. "It's been a while." Elena shook it. "Ma'am, you've been busy. The mission required it." Chen's expression suggested she knew exactly how diplomatically Elena was phrasing, "I conducted an unauthorized direct action operation that violated every protocol in the handbook." "Walk with me," Chen said. They moved away from the tarmac toward a secure briefing room that had been set up specifically for this meeting. Inside, the walls were lined with screens showing satellite imagery, signals intercepts, and tactical maps of Kharif province. Chen didn't sit. She went straight to the main screen, which displayed a photo of Karim Nazari. "Let's be clear about something from the start," she said without preamble. "What you did last night, extracting a compromised asset from hostile territory while being actively hunted, was either a brilliant tactical gamble or a catastrophic operational failure. The only reason we're having this conversation instead of a disciplinary hearing is because it worked." "Understood," Elena said. "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, Ghost Lead just stopped being a shadow and became a spotlight. Every intelligence network in this region is going to be asking questions about what happened in Khalad Sharif. The enemy knows you exist, they know what you can do, and they're actively hunting for you." Elena met Chen's gaze steadily. "Yes, ma'am, and that's exactly why we need to change how Ghost Lead operates." Chen studied her for a long moment. "Explain." "For 7 years I've been effective because the enemy didn't know I existed. They couldn't plan for what they couldn't see. But that advantage is gone. Nazari has my code name. He's building countermeasures. He's planning an operation specifically designed to prove that Ghost Lead can be defeated." Elena gestured to Nazari's photo. "So we have 2 choices. Either we pull Ghost Lead from the field and watch him execute whatever he's planning, or we adapt faster than he can counter." "Adapt how?" "By stopping trying to be invisible and starting to be unpredictable." Elena pulled up a tactical map. Nazari expects Ghost Lead to operate like a coordinator, providing intelligence, calling in strikes, staying in the shadows. He's not expecting a direct action team. He's not expecting Ghost Lead to come for him personally. Webb, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. We've been analyzing the intelligence from Hamid's debrief. The weapons shipments, the Russian advisors, the timeline, it all points to something much larger than a standard insurgent operation. Chen turned to him. How large? Potentially battalion-sized assault, multiple objectives, coordinated timing. Webb pulled up a series of intercepts. Signals intelligence shows communication patterns consistent with planning for a major offensive, and the timing matches what Hamid told us, approximately 3 weeks out. Target assessment? Most likely Kabul, specifically coalition command structures and government facilities. If Nazari can execute a successful assault on the capital, it would be a massive propaganda victory. It would show that the insurgency can strike anywhere, anytime. Chen absorbed that. And you believe a direct action team can prevent this? I believe the only way to prevent it is to remove the head of the operation, Elena said. Nazari is the linchpin. He's the one with the contacts, the experience, the tactical knowledge to pull this off. Without him, the network fragments. You're talking about assassination. Elena didn't flinch. I'm talking about neutralizing a high-value target who represents an imminent threat to American and coalition forces. Semantics. Accuracy. Chen almost smiled at that. You've got nerve, Vance. I'll give you that. She turned back to the screens. All right, let's assume I authorize this operation. You're going to need a team, people with the right skills and clearances, people who can operate at Ghost Lead's level. I have some ideas about that. I'm sure you do. But before we get into personnel, I need to know you understand what you're asking for here. Chen's voice hardened. This isn't coordination. This isn't support. This is kinetic action against a target in denied territory. You'll be exposing Ghost Lead to direct combat. If you're captured, if you're killed, the program is compromised. Do you understand that? Yes, ma'am. And you're still willing to proceed? Elena thought about Karif Valley, about the soldiers who'd survived because she'd been there, about Hamid, who'd been tortured for information he'd gathered at immense personal risk, about every operation over 7 years where she'd coordinated from the shadows while others did the bleeding. I'm willing, she said. Chen studied her face for several seconds. Then she nodded. All right, you have authorization for team assembly and mission planning. But Vance, this is a one-shot operation. If it fails, if Ghost Lead is compromised, the program is done. 7 years of development, hundreds of millions in funding, all the operations you've successfully conducted, it all ends. I understand. I hope so. Chen pulled out a tablet and tapped through several screens. You'll have access to priority intelligence feeds, tactical support assets, and discretionary operational funding. But the team composition is on you. Choose carefully. I will. Good. Because the clock is already running. 3 weeks until Nazari's operation goes live, assuming that timeline holds. You'll need to locate him, plan the strike, execute, and exfil, all while being hunted by security forces who know you're in the region. Chen paused. No pressure. Elena allowed herself a thin smile. Pressure is what makes diamonds. Pressure is also what crushes coal into dust. Try to remember which one you are. Chen headed toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Your first recruit, Sergeant Mason Cole. His after-action report from the Karif Valley ambush was interesting. He didn't explicitly mention Ghost Lead, but he came very close to connecting dots that aren't supposed to be connected. Cole is smart, and he saw what happened. Exactly, which is why I'm authorizing you to read him in if you think he's suitable for the team. Full clearance, full briefing. But Vance, if you bring him on board, he's in this for life. Ghost Lead doesn't do temporary assignments. Elena nodded. Understood. Chen left, her security detail falling in around her as she walked back to the waiting helicopter. Within minutes, she was airborne, the Black Hawk climbing hard and banking south toward wherever deputy directors went when they weren't authorizing assassination missions. Webb turned to Elena. So, you need a team. I need a team. Cole is the obvious first choice. Infantry background, combat experience, and he's already seen Ghost Lead in action. Agreed. Who else? Webb pulled up personnel files. Torres, Staff Sergeant Maria Torres, weapons specialist, urban combat expert, 3 tours in high-threat environments. She was in the convoy with Cole, already has some exposure to your methods. She'll work. Who else? That depends on what kind of operation you're planning. If you're going kinetic, you'll need a designated marksman. If you're going infiltration, you'll need someone with language skills and cultural knowledge. Elena studied the tactical map of Kharif province. We need both. Nazari won't be in the open. He'll be protected, probably in an urban environment with multiple security layers. We'll need to infiltrate, locate, and execute, which means we need someone who can move through local populations without triggering alerts. I might have someone. Webb pulled up a new file. Captain David Reyna, Special Forces, cross-trained with local military units. Fluent in Pashto and Dari. He's currently attached to a provincial reconstruction team, but as his file shows prior experience with unconventional warfare and denied area operations. Elena scanned the file. Reyna's photo showed a man in his early 30s with sun-weathered skin and the kind of eyes that had seen things he'd never talk about at family dinners. His service record was impressive. Multiple combat deployments, several commendations, and a notation about specialized training that was code for something classified. He's cleared for special access programs? Elena asked. Checked the box for it 3 years ago. He's read in on several programs that don't officially exist. Webb paused. Including some that make Ghost Lead look conventional. Get him. Just like that? Just like that. If he's as good as this file suggests, we need him. Webb made notes. Okay, Cole, Torres, Reyna. That's 3 plus you. Enough for a direct action team, but small enough to stay mobile. What else do you need? Intelligence support. Real time. I'll need access to everything. Satellite imagery, signals, intercepts, human intelligence. And I'll need it feeding directly to me in the field, not filtered through command channels. That's going to require some technical infrastructure. Then build it. Webb raised an eyebrow. You realize you're essentially asking for your own tactical operations center. I'm asking for the tools to do the job you're asking me to do. Elena met his eyes. This isn't a standard operation, Marcus. We can't run it through standard channels. Either give me what I need or tell Chen you can't support the mission. Webb held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll set it up, but it's going to take at least 48 hours to get everything in place. You have 24. Elena, 24 hours, Marcus. Because that's how long it's going to take me to brief the team, plan the initial reconnaissance, and figure out where the hell Nazari is hiding. Every hour we spend setting up infrastructure is an hour Nazari spends preparing his attack. Webb sighed. You're going to give me an ulcer. You'll survive. Elena headed toward the door. Have Cole, Torres, and Reyna here by 1400 hours. I'll conduct the team briefing then. And what are you going to do in the meantime? Talk to Hamid again. He's the only person who's seen Nazari's operation from the inside. If we're going to find our target, we need every detail he can provide. Elena found Hamid in the base medical facility, his leg bandaged and elevated, but his eyes sharp and alert. The doctor had given him pain medication, but apparently not enough to dull his mind. He sat up when Elena entered. The American ghost, he said in accented English. Come to check on her investment. Come to get information, Elena replied, pulling a chair close to his bed. You told me Nazari is planning something big. I need details. Everything you saw, heard, or suspected. Hamid's expression grew serious. You're going after him. Yes. That's suicide. He has dozens of fighters protecting him, maybe more. Let me worry about that. You worry about giving me intelligence I can use. Hamid studied her face. You really think you can stop him? One woman against an entire network? I'm not one woman. I'm one operator with access to resources you can't imagine. Elena leaned forward. But those resources are useless if I can't find the target. So talk to me. Where does Nazari operate from? Hamid was silent for a moment, organizing his thoughts. He moves constantly. Never stays in one place more than 2 nights. He has safe houses throughout the province, some in cities, some in remote villages. He uses a rotation system so his security team doesn't know the pattern. But you found him. I was fortunate. I delivered spices to a compound in Mazari, a mid-sized town about 40 clicks north of here. I saw vehicles I recognized from previous deliveries, and I saw men who carried themselves like soldiers, not farmers. Hamid paused. And I saw the Russian advisors. Describe them. 3 men, late 30s, early 40s, military bearing but wearing civilian clothes. They spoke Russian among themselves, broken Pashto with Nazari's people. One of them was inspecting weapons, new AK-74s, not the old 47s you usually see here. Another was looking at maps with Nazari. Elena absorbed that. Russian advisors with modern weapons meant this wasn't just local insurgent activity. Someone with resources was backing Nazari's operation. Did you hear anything about their plans, specific targets, timing? Not specifics, but I heard them arguing about coordination. The Russian, the one with the maps, he kept saying something about windows and synchronization, like they were planning multiple strikes that had to happen at the same time. Coordinated assault. Multiple targets. Precisely what Webb's intelligence assessment had suggested. And Nazari? Is Nazari still there? Hamid shook his head. By now? No. Like I said, he moves constantly. That was 3 days ago. He could be anywhere in the province. But you know his patterns. You've been watching him for months. I know some patterns, yes. He prefers urban environments. Easier to blend in, more escape routes. He avoids anywhere with heavy coalition presence. And he always positions himself near major roads so he can move quickly if needed. Elena pulled out a map of Kharif province. Show me the locations you know about. Every safe house, every compound, every place you've seen him or his people. Hamid studied the map, then started pointing. Here, Mazari, where I saw the Russians. Here, a compound outside Talukan. Here and here. 2 locations in Rashid, the provincial capital. And here, an abandoned factory complex near the border, very isolated. Elena marked each location, her tactical mind already running probability calculations. 5 known locations, but Nazari could have a dozen more. Finding him would require either incredible luck or better intelligence. The Russians, she said. Did you get any names? Identifying features? No names. But the one with the maps, he had a scar, here. Hamid traced a line down his left cheek. Old wound, probably shrapnel, and he limped slightly, left leg. Identifying characteristics. Something signals intelligence could potentially cross-reference with known Russian military or intelligence personnel. Good. What else? The weapons shipments, they come from the north across the border. I saw crates being unloaded. Heavy weapons, anti-aircraft missiles, mortars, professional military equipment, not the improvised weapons local insurgents usually use. How often do the shipments come? I don't know exactly, but I heard Nazari tell one of his commanders that the final delivery was scheduled for next week. After that, they'd have everything they needed. Next week, which meant the operation timeline was even tighter than they'd thought. If Nazari received his final weapons shipment, he'd be ready to launch. Elena needed to find him before that happened. Is there anything else, any detail, no matter how small, that might help locate him? Hamid thought carefully. He has a woman, not a wife, a companion. She travels with him sometimes. Dark hair, maybe 30 years old. She's not one of his fighters, but she's always near him when I've seen them together. Operational security liability, Elena murmured. He's keeping her close despite the risk, which means she's important to him. Or he doesn't trust her out of his sight, Hamid suggested. Also possible. Either way, it was another data point. Elena stood. You've been very helpful. Is there anything you need? To go home. Hamid's voice was tired. To my family. To pretend I'm just a spice merchant again. Once this is over, we'll relocate you. New identity, new location. You won't have to pretend anymore. And Nazari? You'll really stop him? Elena met his eyes. Yes. How can you be sure? Because stopping people like him is what I do. She moved toward the door, then paused. The intelligence you provided, it's going to save lives. A lot of lives. Thank you. Hamid nodded slowly. Just be careful. Nazari is not like other insurgent commanders. He thinks several moves ahead. If you come for him, He'll be ready. So will I. Elena left the medical facility and headed directly to the secure planning room Webb had set up. She had 5 hours before the team briefing, and she intended to use every minute preparing. The room was already stocked with everything she'd requested: detailed maps, satellite imagery updated within the last 6 hours, signals intelligence reports, and a secure communication system that would let her coordinate with assets across the entire theater. She spread Hamid's 5 known locations across the main screen and began analyzing each one. Mazari, mid-sized town, population approximately 15,000. Good infrastructure, multiple escape routes, heavy enough civilian population to provide cover. But also the location where Hamid had seen Nazari most recently, which meant the enemy might have already moved on. Talukan, smaller, more rural, less infrastructure but closer to the border, which would make weapons shipments easier to receive. Possible staging area rather than operational headquarters. Rashid, the provincial capital. Population over 50,000. Maximum anonymity, but also higher coalition presence. Risky for someone trying to stay hidden. The abandoned factory, isolated, defensible, but also obvious. The kind of location coalition forces would check during routine patrols. Elena ran probability algorithms, factoring in everything she knew about Nazari's operational patterns. Urban preference, proximity to major roads, rotation system. Her analysis kept coming back to Rashid. It was the riskiest location, which paradoxically made it the safest. Coalition forces focused their attention on rural areas and border regions, assuming insurgent leadership wouldn't be bold enough to hide in the provincial capital. But Nazari wasn't a typical insurgent commander. He thought several moves ahead, according to Hamid, which meant he'd probably calculated that the most dangerous location was actually the safest. Elena made a note to prioritize Rashid in the reconnaissance plan. At 1400 hours exactly, Webb entered with 3 people following him. Sergeant Mason Cole looked exactly as Elena remembered, hard-eyed, professional, still carrying the wariness of someone who'd recently survived an ambush. Staff Sergeant Maria Torres walked with the controlled grace of someone who'd spent years perfecting violence as a craft. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging exits and sightlines in a heartbeat. Captain David Reyna was taller than his file photo suggested, with the kind of weathered face that came from years operating in hostile environments. He moved with casual confidence that suggested he was comfortable in situations that would terrify most people. All 3 stopped when they saw Elena. Cole's expression shifted to something like recognition. Torres's eyes narrowed slightly. Reyna just watched, evaluating. "Gentlemen, Sergeant Torres," Elena said, "welcome to Ghost Lead." "Ghost Lead," Cole repeated slowly. So that part was real. Very real. Please, sit. They took positions around the briefing table, each maintaining the spatial awareness of combat veterans, close enough to communicate, far enough to react independently. Elena activated the main screen, bringing up Nazari's photo. "Before we begin, you need to understand something. What you're about to be briefed on is classified at the highest levels. The program you're joining doesn't officially exist. The operations you'll conduct won't appear in any records, and if you're captured or killed, the United States government will deny any knowledge of your activities." She paused, letting that sink in. "If anyone wants to leave, now is the time. No judgment, no consequences. But once I start the briefing, you're committed." Silence. Nobody moved. "Good," Elena said. "Let's talk about Karim Nazari." She spent the next hour laying out everything: the intelligence from Hamid, the Russian advisors, the weapons shipments, the planned attack on Kabul, and the 3-week timeline. Cole interrupted halfway through. "You're telling us one insurgent commander is planning a battalion-sized assault on the capital? That's insane," Elena suggested. "Impossible. Yes, it is. Which is exactly why he might succeed. Nobody expects this level of sophistication from a regional insurgent network." Torres spoke for the first time. "And our mission is to stop him. Our mission is to eliminate him before he can launch. Cut off the head, the body dies." Reyna leaned forward. "Direct action against a high-value target in denied territory. Do we have operational support?" "Full support. Air assets, signals intelligence, satellite coverage, anything you need." Elena pulled up the tactical maps. But the operation itself will be conducted by this team. 4 operators, minimal footprint. 4 against what could be dozens of security forces, Cole said. Maybe more. 4 operators who are very good at what they do, Elena corrected. This isn't about overwhelming force. This is about precision, speed, and surprise. And if something goes wrong, Torres asked. Elena met her eyes. Then we adapt and overcome. That's what special operations teams do. Reyna studied the maps. You've identified possible locations? 5 known safe houses based on human intelligence. My assessment is that Nazari is most likely in Rashid, the provincial capital. It's the boldest location, which makes it the safest paradox. You're betting our lives on a paradox? Cole's tone was skeptical but not hostile. I'm betting on analysis and experience, but I'm open to input. That's why you're here. Elena gestured to the screens. This is your operation as much as mine. If you see problems with the plan, speak up. The 3 of them exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally, Torres spoke. We need more intelligence before we commit to any location. Reconnaissance first. Agreed, Elena said. Which is why our first phase is surveillance. We identify Nazari's current location, map his security patterns, and find our window of opportunity. And if we can't find him in 3 weeks, Cole asked, then we run out of time and Nazari launches his attack. But that's not going to happen. You sound very confident. I'm very motivated. There's a difference. Elena pulled up an operational timeline. We have 19 days before Nazari's projected launch date. I'm allocating 7 days for reconnaissance, 3 days for detailed planning, 2 days for final preparation, and 1 day for execution. That gives us a 6-day buffer for complications. Reyna nodded slowly. That's tight, but workable, assuming everything goes perfectly. Nothing goes perfectly, Torres said. That's why we have the buffer. Exactly. Elena looked at each of them in turn. So, are we doing this? Cole spoke first. You saved my team's life in Karif Valley. I owe you for that. And if this Nazari bastard is planning what you say he's planning, he shrugged. Yeah, I'm in. Torres was more direct. I'm in. Reyna took a moment longer, his eyes moving across the tactical displays. Then he nodded. This is what I signed up for. I'm in. Elena felt something settle in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or just the certainty that comes from having the right people in the right positions. Good, she said. Then let's get to work. The next 6 days were a masterclass in patience and precision. Elena's team infiltrated Rashid in pairs, Reyna and Torres first, posing as aid workers with a medical NGO that actually existed and had been briefed to provide cover. Cole and Elena followed 48 hours later, arriving separately and using different routes. Rashid was a city caught between centuries. Ancient bazaars sprawled alongside modern cell phone shops. Donkey carts shared roads with pickup trucks. Minarets rose above concrete apartment blocks. And everywhere, the careful dance of people trying to survive in a place where violence could erupt without warning. Elena established their operations center in a rented apartment overlooking the Central Market District. From the 3rd-floor window, she had sight lines across half the city. Satellite feeds gave her the other half. The reconnaissance was methodical. Reyna, with his language skills and cultural knowledge, moved through the city's networks asking careful questions, listening to rumors, mapping the invisible geography of power and influence. Torres conducted technical surveillance, placing micro-cameras and audio devices in strategic locations. Cole coordinated security, watching for threats and maintaining escape routes. And Elena analyzed everything, building a picture of Nazari's presence in the city piece by piece. On day 3, they got their first confirmation. A signals intercept picked up a burst transmission using encryption patterns associated with Nazari's network. The transmission originated from a compound in the Western District, a wealthy neighborhood where successful merchants and minor government officials lived. The compound matched one of the locations Hamid had identified. Elena had web-pull satellite imagery going back 2 weeks. The photos showed a pattern, vehicles arriving at night, staying for 1 or 2 days, then departing. Never the same vehicles twice. Classic rotation system. But the current imagery showed 3 vehicles that had been there for 4 days. Something had changed. Nazari was staying longer than usual. Could be a trap, Cole said when Elena showed him the analysis. He knows you're looking for him. This could be bait. Could be, Elena agreed. Or it could be that he's preparing for his operation and needs to be in one place long enough to coordinate. Torres leaned over the satellite photos. Either way, we need eyes on that compound. Real-time visual confirmation before we plan anything. Agreed. Elena pulled up street maps. The compound has 12-foot walls, single vehicle entrance, guard posts at the corners. We're not getting surveillance inside without being spotted. So we go high, Reyna said. He pointed to a building across the street, 5 stories, flat roof, clear sightlines to the compound. I can get on that roof with a spotting scope, give us visual confirmation and pattern analysis. Elena studied the angles. That building is residential. You'll be exposed. Not if I do it right. Local dress, moving at prayer times when everyone's distracted, carrying something that looks like maintenance equipment. Reyna shrugged. I've done this before. When? Afghanistan, Syria, Mali. Take your pick. His expression was matter-of-fact. This is actually easier. Nobody here expects a foreign operator to be bold enough to set up surveillance in broad daylight. The same paradox Elena had used to locate Nazari in the first place. Do it, she said. But Torres goes with you. 2-person team, mutual security. Copy that. They moved the next morning, timing their entry to the building during the pre-dawn prayer when the streets were mostly empty. Elena watched from the operations center as 2 thermal signatures climbed the building's external stairs and took position on the roof. Reyna's voice came through the encrypted radio. Ghost lead, we're in position. I have clear sight lines to the compound. Copy. What do you see? 2 guards at the main gate, another 2 on the roof corners, all armed with AK variants. They're alert but not nervous. This is routine security, not heightened threat posture. Any sign of Nazari? Negative, but there's a black SUV in the courtyard that matches the description from Hamid's intel. Russian-made, tinted windows, reinforced frame. Elena's pulse quickened. That's one of the vehicles associated with the Russian advisors. Then they're here, Torres added. Or they were recently. For the next 8 hours, Reyna and Torres maintained surveillance while Elena coordinated with Webb to cross-reference every detail. License plates ran through databases. Guard shift patterns were analyzed. Communication signals emanating from the compound were intercepted and decoded. By nightfall, they had confirmation. Karim Nazari was inside that compound. The final weapons shipment had arrived 2 days ago. And according to Signal's intelligence, Nazari was conducting final planning meetings with his commanders. The operation against Kabul was entering its last phase, which meant Ghost Lead's window was closing. Elena called the team together that night in the operations center. They gathered around the planning table, faces illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. We have positive ID, Elena said without preamble. Nazari is in the compound, along with at least 3 Russian advisors, and an estimated 20 to 30 security personnel. Cole whistled low. 30 against 4. I've had worse odds, but not by much. We're not fighting 30, Elena corrected. We're eliminating one target and extracting before the others can react. Speed and precision, not sustained combat. Torres pulled up the compound layout. The walls are too high to scale quickly. The main gate is the only practical entry point and it's guarded. How do we get inside? We don't. Elena brought up a different view, overhead thermal imaging. We bring Nazari outside. Reyna leaned forward, studying the image. Explain. Nazari rotates locations every 2 days for security, but he's been in this compound for 4 days, which means he's breaking his own pattern. That suggests whatever meeting he's conducting is too important to interrupt. So we interrupt it, Cole said slowly, catching on. Exactly. We create a security threat that forces him to evacuate. And when he does, we take him. Torres shook her head. He'll have security escort, armed vehicles, planned routes with fallback positions. We won't get a clean shot. We will if we control where he runs. Elena traced a route on the map. There are 3 logical escape routes from that compound. We blocked 2 of them. Nothing obvious, just enough to make them unusable. Traffic accident here, construction barrier here. That leaves 1 route. And we own that route, Reyna finished. Classic channeling tactic. Classic but effective. Elena pulled up satellite imagery of the route, a narrow street that ran along the city's western edge before connecting to the main highway. There's a choke point here where the street narrows to single-lane traffic, buildings on both sides, minimal sight lines, limited escape options. Cole studied it. That's also a kill box if things go wrong. We'll be exposed. Only for about 90 seconds. That's the window, from the moment Nazari's vehicle enters the choke point to the moment backup arrives. 90 seconds to execute. Can we do it in 90 seconds? Torres asked. Elena met her eyes. We have to. The next 24 hours were spent in meticulous preparation. Torres and Reyna positioned equipment along the escape route, remote-activated tire shredders, concealed cameras, communication relays. Cole coordinated with Webb to ensure air support would be standing by for emergency extraction. And Elena ran simulations, timing every movement, calculating every variable. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Phase 1. Create the security threat. A controlled explosion near the compound, close enough to trigger evacuation protocols, far enough to avoid casualties. The explosion would be blamed on a gas leak or construction accident. Phase 2. Nazari evacuates via the one remaining viable route. His security team, following their training, would prioritize speed over caution. Get the asset away from the threat as fast as possible. Phase 3. The ambush. 90 seconds. 4 operators. 1 target. Phase 4. Extraction. Black helicopter already airborne, following an emergency medical flight path to avoid suspicion. Pickup at a predetermined LZ 3 clicks from the ambush site. Simple. Except every single phase depended on Nazari reacting exactly as predicted. 1 deviation, 1 unexpected security measure, and the entire operation collapsed. You realize this is insane, right? Cole said the night before execution. They were going through final equipment checks, each piece of gear inspected and re-inspected until it was perfect. So you keep saying, Elena replied, checking the magazine on her Glock for the 3rd time. I'm serious. We're betting everything on Nazari following his evacuation protocol. What if he doesn't? What if he decides to shelter in place? Then we adapt. Adapt how? We can't assault a fortified compound with 4 people. Elena set down her weapon and looked at him. Cole, I understand your concern, but here's the reality. Nazari is planning an operation that will kill hundreds of people, maybe thousands. He's got Russian support, heavy weapons, and a timeline that puts him 7 days away from execution. We can spend those 7 days planning the perfect operation, or we can execute an imperfect operation that actually has a chance of stopping him. Cole was silent for a moment. Then, and if we fail? Then we fail trying, which is better than succeeding at doing nothing. Torres, who'd been listening from across the room, spoke up. The sergeant has a point, though. We should have contingencies for when, not if, something goes wrong. Agreed. Elena pulled up the tactical display. Contingency 1. If Nazari doesn't evacuate, we abort and fall back to the secondary plan. Targeted strike using air assets. Messier, higher collateral damage risk, but it gets the job done. Contingency 2? Reyna asked. If Nazari evacuates but takes an unexpected route, we track and follow. Webb has drone coverage over the entire Western District. We'll see where he goes. And contingency 3? Elena's expression was grim. If we're compromised during the ambush and can't extract cleanly, we go loud. Full combat engagement, emergency extraction, and damn the consequences. The weight of that settled over the room. Going loud meant exposing Ghost Lead completely. It meant the end of 7 years of invisible operations. It meant burning every bridge and every asset. But it also meant completing the mission. Questions? Elena asked. Nobody spoke. All right then. Elena checked her watch. We execute in 14 hours. Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out if Ghost Lead can become more than a shadow. None of them slept well. Elena spent the hours before dawn running through the plan one final time, finding flaws that didn't exist and solutions to problems that might never occur. It was how her mind worked, the obsessive need to control every variable, to eliminate every source of uncertainty. But deep down, she knew the truth. No plan survived contact with the enemy. Something would go wrong. The only question was whether they could adapt fast enough when it did. At 0500 hours, the team began moving into position. Torres and Reyna took the ambush site, concealing themselves in a second-floor apartment that had been rented under a cover identity. Cole positioned himself at the southern checkpoint, ready to trigger the blocking measures that would channel Nazari's escape route. And Elena moved to an overwatch position 600 meters from the compound, where she could coordinate the operation and trigger the initial explosion. Webb's voice crackled in her ear. Ghost lead, overwatch. All assets are in position. ISR shows normal activity at the target compound. No indication they suspect anything. Copy, overwatch. Stand by for execution. Elena settled into her position behind a low wall, pulling out the detonation device. The explosive was a simple gas cylinder that had been planted in a maintenance shed 2 blocks from the compound. When triggered, it would create a spectacular but relatively harmless explosion, enough to panic the neighborhood, not enough to actually hurt anyone. She checked the time, 6:30 hours. Right when Nazari would be finishing his morning coordination meeting, according to the pattern analysis. Her finger hovered over the trigger. 7 years of ghost lead operations had been built on staying invisible, on coordinating from the shadows, on never putting herself directly in harm's way. This was different. This was stepping into the light and daring the enemy to see her. Elena pressed the trigger. The explosion 2 blocks away was exactly as spectacular as planned. A thunderous boom followed by a column of flame and smoke that rose into the dawn sky. Car alarms started wailing. People began shouting. The entire neighborhood erupted into controlled chaos. Inside the compound, the security team reacted immediately. Elena watched through binoculars as guards rushed to positions, weapons ready. The main gate opened. The black SUV's engine started. 60 seconds after the explosion, the SUV emerged from the compound with 2 escort vehicles, one ahead, one behind, exactly as the evacuation protocol dictated. They turned north toward the main highway, then encountered Cole's first blocking measure, a delivery truck that had accidentally stalled in the intersection, completely blocking the road. The convoy hesitated for 5 seconds, then turned west, directly toward the second blocked route. Cole's voice came through the radio. Lead vehicle is deviating. They're checking the western route. Elena's jaw clenched. If they found that route blocked too quickly, they might realize they were being channeled, might turn back to the compound, might call for backup instead of running. How long until they reach the western blockage? She asked. 30 seconds. Not enough time to make it look accidental. The security team would see 2 blocked routes in quick succession and know it wasn't coincidence. Elena made a split-second decision. Cole, remove the western blockage. Let them through. What? But that's not the kill zone. Do it now. Cole hesitated for half a second, then, copy, removing blockage. The convoy reached the western intersection and found it clear, just a construction barrier that had been moved aside. They accelerated through without stopping. Torres's voice cut in. They're not coming to us. They're taking the western route all the way to the highway. Damn it. Elena was already moving, sprinting toward her vehicle. All units, abort ambush position. We're going mobile. Stay on the convoy and wait for a new opportunity. She threw herself into the driver's seat of the nondescript sedan they'd staged for exactly this contingency. The engine roared to life. She pulled into traffic 3 cars behind the convoy. Reyna's voice. I have visual. Black SUV is in the middle position. 2 escort vehicles maintaining close formation. Copy. Overwatch. Where are they heading? Webb came back immediately. Tracking now. Current vector has them heading toward the northern district. Wait. There's a secondary compound in that area. Not on Hamid's list, but signals intelligence shows occasional encrypted traffic from that location. A safe house they hadn't identified. Of course, Nazari had backup locations. Of course, he'd planned for multiple contingencies. The convoy moved through morning traffic with practiced efficiency. Not speeding, that would draw attention, but not hesitating either. Professional security work. Elena kept her distance, using other vehicles for concealment. Her mind raced through options. The northern district was more open than the western choke point. Fewer buildings, wider streets, less civilian traffic, worse terrain for an ambush, but it was also farther from coalition patrols, which meant less chance of interference if things went loud. Torres, Reina, Elena said into her radio. Can you get ahead of the convoy? Set up a hasty blocking position? Negative, Torres replied. We're in the wrong part of the city. By the time we reposition, they'll be at their destination. Cole? Same problem. I'm at least 10 minutes behind them. Which left Elena. 1 operator, 3 vehicles, professional security team, terrible odds. But she'd worked with worse. Overwatch, she said calmly. I need real-time navigation to get ahead of this convoy. And I need to know if there are any natural choke points between their current position and the northern compound. Webb's response came back fast. He was already working the problem. Sending route now. There's one possibility. A narrow bridge over an irrigation canal. Single lane, concrete barriers on both sides. If you can get there first, I can. Elena glanced at her GPS as the route populated. How long until the convoy reaches the bridge? 4 minutes at current speed. And how long for me to reach it? 3 minutes 40 seconds if you push hard. 20 seconds. Not much margin for error. Elena pressed the accelerator and cut across 2 lanes of traffic, earning angry horn blasts from other drivers. She accelerated hard, weaving through gaps that barely existed, pushing the sedan to its limits. The GPS counted down. 2 minutes. 90 seconds. 1 minute. She could see the bridge ahead. A simple concrete span maybe 50 meters long, just wide enough for 1 vehicle at a time. Perfect. Elena skidded to a stop at the bridge's entrance, angling her vehicle to block the lane. She killed the engine, pocketed the keys, and moved to position behind the concrete barrier on the side of the bridge. From here, she had sight lines down the approach road. The convoy appeared 30 seconds later. The lead escort vehicle slowed as it approached the bridge, the driver seeing Elena's blocking car. The convoy stopped completely, maintaining defensive spacing. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the passenger door of the lead vehicle opened. A man stepped out, tall, bearded, carrying an AK-47 with the casual competence of someone who'd used it before. He walked toward Elena's abandoned sedan, weapon at the ready. Elena waited, her Glock drawn but concealed behind the barrier. The guard circled the sedan, checking for threats, finding none. He pulled out a radio and spoke into it, probably reporting that the road was blocked by what appeared to be an abandoned vehicle, asking for instructions. The response must have been to clear the blockage and continue, because the guard slung his rifle and moved to push Elena's sedan out of the way. That's when Elena stood up. "Stop," she said in English. The guard spun, rifle coming up fast. Elena shot him twice in the chest. He went down hard. The convoy erupted into action immediately. Doors flew open. Armed men poured out, taking cover behind vehicles and training weapons on Elena's position. But Elena wasn't there anymore. She'd dropped back behind the barrier the instant after firing, rolling to a new position 5 meters away. Bullets chewed into the concrete where she'd been standing. "Overwatch," Elena said into her radio, her voice calm despite the gunfire. "I've engaged the convoy. Need immediate support." Webb's voice came back tight with urgency. "Ghost Lead, what the hell are you doing?" "Completing the mission. Where's my air support?" 2 minutes out." "I don't have 2 minutes." More gunfire. The security team was advancing on her position, using proper tactical movement, one element providing covering fire while another bounded forward. Professional. Elena counted 8 shooters, which meant there were probably more still in the vehicles, including Nazari. She pulled a flashbang grenade from her vest and threw it over the barrier. The bang and flash forced the advancing team to take cover, buying her a few seconds. "Cole, Torres, Reina," she called on the radio. "I need you here now. I'm pinned down." 4 minutes out, Cole responded. "Can you hold?" "I'll have to." Elena blind fired over the barrier, not trying to hit anything, just forcing the security team to stay cautious. She was outnumbered and outgunned. Her only advantages were the concrete barrier and the fact that Nazari's security team couldn't use heavy weapons without risking their principal. But those advantages wouldn't last long. She could hear orders being shouted in Pashto. The security team was coordinating a flanking movement. They'd pin her with suppressive fire while another element worked around to her side. Standard small unit tactics. And effective. Elena had maybe 60 seconds before that flanking element reached firing position. She pulled her last flashbang, threw it to buy time, then sprinted along the bridge to a new position, moving before the security team could adjust their fire. Bullets snapped past her. One tugged at her sleeve, another sparked off the concrete at her feet. She dove behind a support pillar, breathing hard. Overwatch? Air support status? 90 seconds. Still too long. Elena pulled her radio. I'm about to do something extremely stupid. Be ready to extract whatever's left of me. Elena, wait! She stood up from behind the pillar, Glock raised, and started walking directly toward the convoy. The security team, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the move, hesitated for half a second. Elena used that half second to engage the closest shooter, 2-round center mass. He dropped. Then she was moving again, advancing and shooting, her training taking over. Sight picture, trigger press, assess, move, repeat. Another shooter down, then another. The security team broke their tactical formation, some falling back, others standing their ground. The convoy was in chaos. And that's when the black SUV's rear door opened. A man stepped out, late 40s, bearded, hard eyes that had seen too much violence. Karim Nazari. He didn't run, didn't hide. He stood there, watching Elena approach, and slowly raised his own weapon, a pistol, small but deadly at this range. Ghost lead, he said in accented English. Finally, we meet. Elena didn't stop walking, didn't lower her weapon. You've been hunting me, Nazari continued, disrupting my operations, destroying my plans. Do you know how much effort you've cost me? Not enough to stop you from planning mass murder. Nazari smiled. Murder is such an ugly word. I prefer strategic action. But I suppose that's the difference between soldiers and terrorists, isn't it? The uniform we wear and the flag we claim. Elena was 15 meters away now, close enough to guarantee a kill shot, far enough that if he fired first, she might survive. Your operation against Kabul is over, she said. Your Russian advisors are going to find themselves very exposed when coalition forces raid your weapons caches, and your network is about to be rolled up from top to bottom. Perhaps. Nazari's finger moved to his trigger. Or perhaps I've already won. After all, I made Ghost Lead visible. I proved that your invisible warfare can be defeated. Every insurgent commander in this region now knows you exist, knows you can be hunted, knows you can be killed. You first, Elena said, and fired. Her round took Nazari in the chest, punching through body armor. He'd been wearing a vest, smart, but the impact staggered him backward. He didn't fall. His pistol came up. He fired. Elena felt the bullet hit her own plate carrier, the impact like a hammer blow that drove the air from her lungs. She fired again, and again, and again. Nazari finally went down, blood spreading across his chest. The remaining security team opened fire from multiple positions. Elena dove behind the SUV as bullets tore into the metal. She was pinned. No escape route. No backup for at least 3 more minutes. This was it. This was how Ghost Lead ended. Then the sky roared. 2 Apache attack helicopters appeared over the horizon, their chain guns already spinning up. They didn't wait for authorization. They didn't issue warnings. They just opened fire. The security team's vehicles exploded under 30mm cannon fire. The surviving shooters scattered, running for cover that didn't exist against airborne weapons platforms. Within 20 seconds, the engagement was over. Elena stood slowly, every muscle screaming, her ribs bruised from the impact of Nazari's round. Webb's voice in her ear. Ghost Lead, are you hit? Negative. Armor caught it. She walked toward Nazari's body, weapon still raised. He was still alive, barely. Blood bubbled from his lips as he tried to speak. Elena knelt beside him. Your operation is done. The weapons caches will be destroyed. Your Russian advisors will be arrested, and every person you recruited will be rolled up within 48 hours. Nazari's eyes found hers. You think this ends with me? No, but it's a start. There are others. Blood flecked his lips. Others who know about Ghost Lead now. You'll never be invisible again. I know. Elena stood. But I'm still here, and you're not. Karim Nazari died with his eyes still open, staring at the woman who'd finally brought him down. Elena turned away as the rest of her team arrived, Cole, Torres, and Reyna converging on the bridge with weapons raised. They stopped when they saw the bodies. "Jesus," Cole breathed. "You did all this alone?" "I had help." Elena gestured to the Apaches circling overhead. "But yes, it's done." Torres moved to Nazari's body, checking for vitals. She looked up and shook her head. "Confirmed KIA." "Good." Elena activated her radio. "Overwatch, this is Ghost Lead. Target is neutralized. Request immediate extraction for team and evidence collection." "Copy, Ghost Lead, extraction inbound, and nice work." "Thank you." The black helicopter appeared 10 minutes later, settling onto the bridge with practiced precision. The same crew chief who'd extracted her from Kala to Sharif gave her a thumbs up as the team climbed aboard. As they lifted off, Elena looked down at the bridge, at Nazari's body being secured by the follow-on team, at the destroyed convoy, and the evidence that would help dismantle his entire network. 7 years of Ghost Lead operations had been about staying invisible. Today had been about stepping into the light and daring the enemy to fight back. The enemy had lost. But Elena knew the cost. Nazari had been right. She'd never be invisible again. The pattern was too visible now. Too many people knew that Ghost Lead existed. The program would have to change, adapt, evolve into something new, or end. Deputy Director Chen was waiting at Griffin when they landed. She stood on the tarmac, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Elena approached, ready for whatever was coming. "Agent Vance," Chen said, "you just conducted an unauthorized solo assault against a high-value target in the middle of a civilian area, engaged in a gunfight that required emergency air support, and exposed the Ghost Lead program to a level of visibility we've spent 7 years trying to avoid." "Yes, ma'am." Chen held her gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled. "That was some of the finest tactical improvisation I've seen in 30 years. Well done." Elena blinked. "Ma'am?" "You eliminated a major threat, prevented a mass casualty attack, and proved that Ghost Lead can adapt beyond its original parameters." Chen pulled out her tablet. "Nazari's death is already having ripple effects. Signals intelligence shows his network fragmenting. The Russian advisors have gone dark. They know coalition forces are coming for them, and we've identified 3 weapons caches that are being raided as we speak." "So the operation against Kabul is stopped?" "Completely. Whatever Nazari was planning died with him." Chen paused. "But he was right about one thing. Ghost Lead as an invisible coordinator is finished. Too many people know about the program now." Elena's chest tightened. "So you're shutting it down?" "No, I'm expanding it." Chen gestured to Cole, Torres, and Reyna, who were being debriefed nearby. "That team you assembled? They're effective, adaptable, and they know how to operate in the spaces between official military action and covert operations. I want to make that permanent." "A direct action team operating under Ghost Lead's mandate?" Exactly. You proved the concept today. Now we build it into something sustainable." Chen met her eyes. "If you're interested in leading it." Elena thought about 7 years of operating alone, of coordinating from shadows, of never being able to share the burden with anyone who understood. And she thought about the bridge, about standing in the open with her team converging to support her, about the feeling of not being alone anymore. "I'm interested," she said. "Good. Because the world still needs ghosts, Agent Vance. Just ghosts who know how to fight when necessary." 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the same secure briefing room where this had all started. But now there were 4 chairs around the table instead of 1. Cole, Torres, and Reyna sat listening as she laid out their first official assignment as Ghost Lead Alpha Team. "We have intelligence about a weapons trafficking network operating along the border," Elena said, pulling up the tactical displays. "They're moving heavy weapons to insurgent cells across 3 provinces. Our mission is to disrupt the network and identify the suppliers." "Rules of engagement?" Torres asked. "Whatever's necessary to complete the mission. We coordinate, we adapt, and if necessary, we engage." Elena looked at each of them in turn. "This isn't like traditional military operations. We don't have clear hierarchies or standard protocols. What we have is trust, skill, and the mandate to operate in places where official forces can't go. Reyna nodded slowly. The spaces between. Exactly. Cole leaned forward. And Ghost Lead? Does the name stay? Elena smiled. The name stays. But the meaning changes. We're not invisible anymore. We're the team that appears when everything else has failed. The last option before the worst outcomes. Sounds dramatic, Torres said. It's accurate. They spent the next 3 hours planning the operation, their voices blending into the kind of tactical synchronization that only came from shared combat and mutual trust. And when they finally broke for the night, Elena stood alone in the briefing room for a moment, looking at the empty chairs. For 7 years, she'd carried the weight of Ghost Lead alone. Now she shared it with people who understood. It wasn't invisibility anymore. It was something better. Webb knocked on the doorframe. You good? Elena turned. Yeah, I'm good. That team you built, they're solid. Chen made the right call making this permanent. I know. And you? How are you handling the transition from solo operator to team leader? Elena considered the question. It's different. Harder in some ways, more people to worry about, more variables to control, but easier in others. Because you're not alone anymore. Because I'm not alone anymore, Elena agreed. Webb handed her a file. Your next assignment after the border operation. Just preliminary intelligence, but it looks like it might be right up Ghost Lead's alley. Elena opened the file, scanning the contents. Another threat. Another mission. Another opportunity to do what she'd been trained to do, but this time she wouldn't be doing it alone. Thank you, Marcus. For what? For believing that Ghost Lead could be more than just a shadow. Webb smiled. You made it more than a shadow the moment you stepped onto that bridge and challenged an entire convoy. I just recognized what you'd already proven. He left, and Elena returned to the tactical displays, already planning the next operation. Outside, the sun was setting over Kharif province, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Somewhere out there, threats were gathering. Enemies were planning. Violence was building toward a crescendo that would require someone to step into the breach. And when that moment came, Ghost Lead would be ready. Not as a shadow, not as an invisible coordinator, but as a team of operators who understood that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was refuse to hide. Sometimes you had to step into the light and dare the darkness to follow. Sometimes you had to prove that no amount of planning could stop someone who refused to quit. And sometimes the quiet operator in the back of the room, the one everyone underestimated, turned out to be the most dangerous person on the battlefield. Because real power doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It proves itself when everything falls apart and someone still finds a way to win. Elena closed the file and headed out into the evening, ready for whatever came next. The legend of Ghost Lead had started with invisibility, but it would continue with something far more powerful, the certainty that when the world needed someone to stand in the impossible spaces and refuse to break, there would always be a team ready to answer that call, and they would never stop fighting for the people who couldn't fight for themselves. Sometimes the most powerful force isn't the one that makes the most noise. It's the one that knows exactly when to step out of the shadows and when to disappear back into them, fighting battles most will never see, but everyone depends on.